All right, good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Village of Woodbury Planning Board meeting. Tonight is January 19th, 2022. I ask that everybody please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Please be seated. Okay. All right, we'll get right into it.
Is that the remedial reading version of the pledge?
Why? Because it was slow?
Very slow. It was deliberate, though.
I just wanted to give you more non-billable time for this call tonight, Rick.
Just what I need.
All right, so let's get right into it. Has the board had a chance to review the minutes from the January 5th meeting? Claudia did make the one revision that Evan pointed out. Has the board had a chance to review those?
Yes.
I'll offer a motion to accept the minutes as provided.
Second.
Second by Evan. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
I abstain.
Duly noted, sir.
Thank you.
All right, before we get into our regular agenda, there is one special item on the agenda this evening. 300 Forest Road, it was an ARB application that we saw, I believe, 2 meetings ago. There was a question on whether or not they needed an area variance for the bump out on that plan. After some back and forth between councils, it has been determined that they do need to seek an area variance for that bump out. So they did reach out to Rick and ask if they could have approval to go to the ZBA to get that variance. As you know, we typically refer applicants to the ZBA. We just don't let them go and apply when they're in front of us. So I said it wouldn't be an issue tonight for them to go in front of the ZBA and see if they can get their variance. So I'm going to offer a motion to have Natalie draft a letter of reference or referral to the ZBA for the 300 Forest Road ARB application.
I'll second.
Second by Tommy. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much for that. All right, first item on the agenda, back to regular business, KJ Water Treatment Facility. Review and discuss revised documents submitted for site plan approval of a proposed water treatment facility located at 147 Springs Road in Highland Mills and is known as the Village of Woodbury Tax Map, Section 213, Block 1, Lot 49. Yes. I saw a couple. So Marissa, and are you leading the applicant tonight?
Correct. Marissa Logan of Jacobitz and Gubitz, attorney for the applicant. I also have Tom Schottel here, who's from CDM Smith. So we're permission to proceed?
Yeah, go right ahead, please.
Thank you. Okay, so we last appeared at the, I believe it was the April 21st, 2021 planning board meeting. So it's been some time. So I wanted to update the board and the consultants as to some items that had occurred before. Tom has a brief PowerPoint presentation that the aim of which is to go over the information that was submitted, as well as, again, it's been 9 months. So we wanted to update the board as to the responses that we submitted, which were in response to consultant comments received back in April. So it's been some time, and we understand that the consultants are going to want to go through their additional comments as well that we received last week. So again, this is a 30.3 acre site on 7 Springs Road. It houses an existing chlorination building. This application is for a water treatment facility that will be located roughly adjacent to the existing chlorination building. A couple of items to go over. First and most importantly is seeker. At the request of attorneys Naughton and Golden, we did submit a large body of documentation actually prior to the last meeting we appeared at, but there was so much that it took several months to go through, understandably. And essentially the goal of that submission was to demonstrate that the previous seeker review that was done for the entire rest of the Catskill Aqueduct project that had been, it's been ongoing for over a decade at this point. That previous seeker review did incorporate this site, did look at it, did look at all the habitat, the wetlands, anything additional that comes up during seeker, and that review was successful. Attorney Golden can chime in at any point if he would like, but to reiterate, him and Attorney Naughton did determine that that seeker review did not need to be reopened. We were bound to the previous determination that was made, and this board, other than discussing the items that may come up in seeker, such as site disturbance, limits of impact, all of those items that your consultants have discussed within their review memorandums, we don't need to reopen it at the seeker level. That review also did include well 33, which I will get to in a second. So both of those two seeker reviews have been closed out for both the water treatment facility as well as well 33. And that's why we're before this board this evening, because you obviously have a current moratorium, but one of those exemptions are for projects that have previously completed seeker. So moving on to well 33. So
Well, before you move on, I just want to go ahead and confirm that I agree with Marissa on all of her points. Seeker has been completed. It includes both the water facility as well as well 33. So seeker is not an issue, and it also is not subject, this project is not subject to the moratorium.
great, thanks, Rick. Okay, so moving on to well 33. As I'm sure you recall, or maybe not for the newest member of the board, but at our meeting in April, and I believe at the meeting in January as well, the board essentially requested that we add well 33, which is a completely separate well, which is currently located on the site and is currently being revised under the authority of the New York State Department of Health, along with DEC, in order to slightly revise that water withdrawal permit, which is also part of our current water application before those two agencies. So that has been occurring, and we have added that to the site plan. There were several months of negotiation over this fact with attorneys Golden and Naughton as well. Again, that seeker review did come up, so that was the purpose of that negotiation. Again, we are also, as it states in our submission documents, that we understand that the board wants to, and it is their position that they want to review that well under their site plan authority. We again submitted that information, added it to the site plan with the reservation that we don't believe site plan review is required for the well itself, as there are limited site plan or impacts, because everything is going to be created via underground directional drilling, which Tom will touch upon on his report as well. But I will also state that WSP, their engineering report was submitted along with our application. They can speak to it much more in depth if the board needs any additional information on that. That's more technical. We can provide that as well. Again, as I stated before, New York State Department of Health is currently reviewing that that revised permit application that includes well 33. We assume that that approval will come very shortly, and we intend to move forward at that point with that well. That is a conversation as well that Attorney Golden again can step in and chime in if he needs to, but is another conversation that I believe both sets of counsel need to have offline. But again, we're here in a continued spirit of cooperation this evening, including that well as part of the site plan review this evening. So we did see some comments from the consultants on that addition. I'm sure they will want to speak to that a little bit more further, and Tom again will touch on it in his presentation. And the two other items, just in the interest of moving forward with this application, I know it's been several months since we've appeared, but it does seem that it would be ripe at this point in time based upon the amount and volume of items that we've submitted to refer both for county GML referral, as well as to potentially, if the board were so inclined, we would request that we would move forward with setting a public hearing at the end of our appearance this evening. And with that, I would, unless anybody has any specific questions, we can always jump back to me, but I would turn it over to Tom to go through his presentation.
Hearing no questions, thank you, Marissa. I guess I'll get right to the matter here, and I'm going to share my screen. Please let me know when you can see the cover slide.
Yes.
Okay, I'm not going to put it in presentation mode because I usually mess that up. So forgive me if it's a little bit smaller than it doesn't take up the full screen. So as Marissa said, we're here to kind of review the comments that the board provided through its consultants back to our original appearance back in April. What I've tried to do is organize these in the same order as the response letter that was sent to you all in mid-December of this year. And for the sake of expediency, I have consolidated some of the comments because they all relate to a large extent, or a good number of the comments relate to the architectural treatment of the building. So those comments have all been kind of consolidated. So if I'm not following the response letter exactly, that's the reason why. Moving through this, let's see if we can get this. Okay. Okay, so just a summary of the project need. This project is being undertaken so the Village of Curious Joe can meet its obligations to continue to supply a fresh potable water source to its residents. So that the drivers of the project really have not changed since we appeared last time back in April. A quick overview of the project. It does involve a considerable length of water transmission main between the Village of Curious Joe and the Catskill Aqueduct up in New Windsor. A lot of that pipe has now been installed. We've made considerable progress. The pipe now extends roughly up to the Halloran Road area up along Route 32. We expect completion of the pipe and the connection of the aqueduct during the 2022 construction season. So the pipe will be completely in the ground by then. The treatment plant remains on the overall project's critical path because in order for the village to utilize Catskill water from the aqueduct, the treatment plant will need to be in place. So as we approach in terms of schedule and approvals, the time is now becoming critical for us to get regulatory approvals for the facility's construction. So the site we're talking about, if you can see my cursor, is down at this end of the pipeline along Seven Springs Road. So summary of the comments we received back in April. What I've done is just put the comments and all this background material that I'm sharing now is in the response letter from December 14th. It was quite voluminous. In some cases, I've abbreviated that because particularly, for the well 33, there was a lot of information provided, and I didn't see the value in representing all that here, but certainly if there's questions resulting from your review of any of the materials we provided, please, I'll do my best to answer them. The first comment related to the colors of the treatment, the building. When we presented renderings at the April meeting in 2021, we provided a rendering that had kind of generic colors with the intent of trying to match the existing chlorination facility, which was already approved by the planning board some years ago. So we thought, for expediency, we would just go ahead with the same colors, but the village is open to having, opinions or any of your preferences relative to the architectural finishes of the building, the colors specifically. These are the choices. These color palettes have been included in the submittal, and the ones that are kind of highlighted here in red are what the original rendering that we presented are based on. So there are options. These are all standard colors, and should there be some custom colors, we can obviously engage with the building manufacturers to look into other options if those should become necessary or desirable. Any questions on the colors? Okay, I'll move on. As Marissa said, some discussions, and my apologies for the size of this. It's a tough, there's a lot of drawings here, but what I'll try to do is orient you. All of this information, or this site plan specifically, has been included in the WSP report that was attached to the December 14th letter, and it's probably a little bit more readable in that form. So what you see here is that report. It was included as an attachment to the letter. And just to orient you on the site, Seven Springs Road is up here along the northern edge of this plan here. The existing chlorination facility is in this corner of the property here, and well 33 is in this corner of the property, or kind of in the middle of the property. And you see the radius of the well radius, where we don't want to get into any kind of development in accordance with DOH requirements. So there will be an underground pipeline run from the wellhead, which will consist of a pitless adapter. I believe the size of the well pump is about a 30 horsepower submersible well. So that will be installed in the screen depth of the well, and there'll be a riser pipe in the well itself, come up to a pitless adapter, which will essentially look like a manhole vault. And the pipe will run to the existing chlorination facility, where it will be disinfected before it enters into the village's distribution system. And that pipe at this point is already active. That chlorination facility is already working. It is actually taking water from the Mountainville well field further upstream, which is roughly half the distance up of the proposed transmission main line. So that line is already charged and providing water to the village. And this well is intended to supplement that water supply until the aqueduct connection is finalized. And then at some future date, when that is been turned on, this well, like the Mountainville wells and the village's in-village wells and other wells that they operate and maintain outside the village, will all be utilized as permanent backup supplies in the event that the aqueduct is taken out of service for maintenance. The city of New York is actively conducting upgrades to the Catskill and Delaware aqueducts. So from time to time, both of those aqueducts are removed from services, and as part of the water supply agreement between the village and the city of New York, they are required to maintain full backup supplies for those for either of those sources. So ultimately, that is what will become of this well until such time as the final connection is made. Before I move on, are there any questions?
No.
Okay. Soil erosion and sediment control plans. One of the requests that was made of us was to provide an updated or a completed soil erosion and sediment control plan. This drawing was submitted in the December submittal. It contains those details, and we can get into some of the details if there are questions, but pretty standard stuff. There's, we will have some facilities provided for construction, tracking of sediments and so forth during construction for construction vehicles in and out of the site. And we will take the appropriate steps, as we are on the other projects that the village is conducting outside of the village and in the village, with silt fences and so on and so forth. So not all the details are shown here, but this is a summary of the silt fence, the perimeter of the silt fence, which you can see, and some of the other stabilized construction entrances and so forth that will be provided during construction and will be maintained throughout the duration of the construction activities there. Any questions?
So far, no.
Okay. Okay. So one of the questions that was raised is whether or not the village intends to use this site for the storage of any equipment, vehicles, materials, or other miscellaneous uses not directly related to the water treatment plant. And the answer to that question is no. Stated quite simply, there's no exhibit for that. It's just the answer is no. That's not in the plan at this point.
I will preface that with, there is currently snow removal equipment being stored at the chlorination plant that's there already.
Okay.
So is that going to stay, or is that going to be removed?
I can't speak for the village, but I was unaware of that, sir, prior to the meeting. So I will make a note of that and let the village know that I'm not sure who's that, if it is the village's or if it belongs to it could very well belong to one of their contractors. So I don't know who owns it, but I will research that and follow up.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No, no worries, not at all. Please, if there's any questions along the way, please feel free. Okay, as I said at the beginning, I did consolidate some of the comments. These all kind of relate to the architectural finish, whether it be view shed studies, ridge preservation, architectural review board. So they all relate to what this facility is going to look like from offsite. So I've combined them all here. I'm not going to repeat every one of them, but they generally all relate to what the appearance of this facility from adjacent properties and from remote properties. So what we've done as requested was to prepare a series of photorealistic view sheds. This one looking from Seven Springs Road across to the treatment plant. So that's what you're seeing here. And I can key this into a map if that would be helpful later on. As I had done on the earlier submittal, I do have those slides so I can give you the perspectives as we progress through here. But this is a view from Seven Springs Road. The next, and these were all again included in the materials. This is again a look from Seven Springs Road from a different perspective. So the building you see here, this smaller building, is the disinfection building that exists presently. And you have the treatment building, and you have a finished water storage tank, or backwash storage tank rather, in the back of the facility. So that is another view. And then finally, we have a view from a little bit further down the hill. This is going west on Seven Springs Road, looking back toward the east. And so you can see the facility from that. Now, again, as I said in the beginning, the colors shown here are consistent with those on the original renderings, and they can be altered based on the selections that I had provided earlier on in the presentation.
I have a question.
Sure.
The trees that are shown in these illustrations, are those existing or some that have to be grown?
Some will have to be grown. We do have a plan to. And there is a landscaping plan that was included in the original submittals. So we will be enhancing the landscaping in front of the building along Seven Springs Road. So we did attempt to preserve some of the existing, because it is the site is presently where the treatment building is, this larger building. It is pretty heavily vegetated along Seven Springs Road, but the amount of construction that's going to take place there was impractical for us, and the amount of regrading that needs to take place there, it was impractical to preserve a lot of that. So we are going to replant a lot of that along Seven Springs Road. Any other questions?
Not at this time.
Okay. Oops. Get rid of that. So there was there was a comment about the septic system. Originally, we had contemplated putting a septic system. There is a laboratory facility in this plant, along with some waste streams that come off that are not directly related to the residuals, which are the materials that get pulled out of the water during the treatment process. We had originally contemplated a septic system, septic tank, and a leach field for that, but after some further consideration, we decided that we were going to install a storage tank. We don't expect that the facility will be regularly manned. It's going to be remotely operated, and with periodic check-ins from staff. That said, we did provide for a laboratory facility, and there are some emergency chemical eye wash facilities, because there will be some chemical stored on the site. So all the building drainage, the plumbing systems, that are not directly associated with the treatment process will drain to this storage tank, which is located right here on the site. So it's on the down gradient side of the site, and that will be periodically emptied with a tanker truck and then taken off probably to the village's wastewater treatment plant for ultimate disposal. Right now, that tank is a 50,000 gallon tank. We may adjust the size of that moving forward. It's very conservatively sized right now. There's a very good chance that that'll get a little bit smaller, but that the 50,000 is a very conservative size, and significantly larger volume than one would expect, even, to be emptied by a typical septic hauler. So that's our plan now moving forward. And as a result, we don't see the need for perk tests and any concerns with, with groundwater infiltration there. Given the proximity of a well nearby, even though we're outside the radius of influence, we thought it would be a better approach to do it this way, since we have a public water supply well right on the site. So that's one of the reasons that led us down that path.
I have another question.
Sure.
You were talking about a laboratory. Would that involve any fume hoods?
No, I said laboratory. I'm sorry. Not a laboratory. It's just sampling. There's like a sampling sink there. There's no fume hoods or any of that in this
Okay,
facility.
thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Maybe I wasn't clear. There are going to be some analytics pHs and some, desk, some kind of benchtop studies done, but nothing that I expect, heavy duty analytical work will take place here. It's all going to be outsourced. Okay, moving on here. There was a request to provide a plan showing the noise levels at the site. And the noisiest piece of equipment at the site is the emergency generator, which is the center of that red target that you see here on the screen. And, the noise radiates out from that. That is an intermittent use. It's only going to be used, on a monthly basis. It'll probably be exercised for 15 minutes, for about 15 minutes on a monthly basis for PM. And then in the event of a power outage to the facility, and the noise levels that you see there, it's approximately 65 dBA at the property line. Any questions?
Go ahead.
I will continue. That's it. I think that was it. That was the end. The rest of the slides that I have in my deck are the original ones that we presented back in April. So I'd be happy to answer any questions at this point if there are any thing that I didn't cover.
Does the board have any direct questions for the applicant right now? Okay, Natalie, ladies first.
All right, good evening, everybody. Try not to go over everything that was discussed so far by Marissa and Tom, but we'll expand on that a little bit as we go through our comments. When the application was last before the board in April of last year, the site plans were submitted after the deadline for consultant review and comment on. We found that the most recent submission seemed partial, such that many of the comments as part of the prior disposition log referred to plans that were not included in this submission. So we went back and forth between the two sets and felt like it would be really helpful for future submissions to kind of consolidate all of the site plan proposals and packages, including well 33 that was really just submitted as part of the DEC package and the site plan package for the planning board review. As well as to provide a disposition of comments provided by our office and NPV and during the board's review tonight, in a comprehensive list. I think that way we can kind of proceed with this application and review it again comprehensively instead of in parse and piecemeal, and just kind of really track these comments as they move forward. So we found that certain issues related to the proposed public water supply well obviously are definitely under the purview of the DOH and the DEC, but there are certain considerations, as far as impacts to the site and disturbance that will be required, although the applicant indicates that most of it will be underground based on this directional drill that's proposed. The directional drill will require staging, including receiving and receiving two pits on either end of the directional drill, as well as connections to the main and the road, and also to the well itself. That'll require some site disturbance. Additionally, I noted in the applicant's response, they said that there is an existing road that'll be used to access and construct the well. We don't see that on the site plans that were submitted, and also Google Earth imagery didn't really show that there was an existing road. So obviously there will be necessary maintenance and access requirements to the well, so that should be shown on the site plan for you to review. let's see. Oh, another consideration with the well is how electric will be provided to the well. It's not clear if how that will be provided and what site disturbance will be required for that. If it's open cut trenching, obviously that's, you know, for the planning board to consider as part of the application before you. And again, when considering the SWIP that is required for the overall site and construction of the wastewater treatment facility, or the water treatment facility, I should say, and also this well and how it's connected to the various distribution systems and treatment, this SWIP should be comprehensive, and the erosion and sediment control should include the connections to the well and all the work that's required as part of the well. I just want to make that apparent here. When we were reviewing the most recent application to the DOH and DEC, we noticed that the applicant indicated a presence of iron and manganese in excess of the state's required maximum contaminant level. We've asked that the applicant clarify as to whether the treatment facility that's proposed would be able to house treatment that would be required for iron and manganese, or if, you know, it's possible that the building that's proposed now would need to be expanded. You know, if that's a possibility, it may need to be considered by the applicant as part of your site plan approval now or an amended approval later. We've also noted that the DEC did require a complaint response and mitigation plan, as well as a 2-year monitoring program as part of the development of well 33 on this site. That was due to drawdown that was experienced in neighboring wells or observed in neighboring wells. That's already been considered by the DEC and they have a plan in place, but I think it would be appropriate for the applicant to provide that to you so that you have it for your records and also for the building department in the event that complaints are received. There was also an inadvertent returns contingency plan that was submitted as part of the horizontal directional drill program. I wanted to confirm that that is being reviewed by the state. We noticed that there were some representations in the plan that required some clarifications, including the fact that a SWIP wouldn't be required, where I think for the planning board's purposes, it is required absolutely. What was that? Tom discussed the holding tank that is proposed, and one of our comments was to clarify what that would be used for, because obviously it seems oversized for just traditional domestic sewage by the wastewater treatment operators. And you did clarify, Tom, that that could be used for certain lab wastes. I think that I'd like you to confirm that that also needs to be reviewed by the state, the holding tank. It seems that based on that, it could be industrial waste requiring DEC review, but that's something that you should confirm with your next submission.
Just to clarify, you know, we're talking about sample waste. So, you know, somebody takes a pH probe or a temperature probe or something like that. We're not going to be doing any wet chemistry on the site. It would be disposal of a sample for something like pH or, you know, a non-wet chemistry type of analyst.
Sure. It still seems oversized, I think, for the application. So, you know, there are some questions about whether or not the treatment in the plant will require some backwash or any kind of other discharge to this holding tank. And again, whether or not the DEC would need to review that, or even the DOH, I think is something that you should confirm. And obviously certain details for that facility will need to be provided. Just for the planning board's purposes, the state has certain guidelines that are set forth, and typically holding tanks aren't permitted for year-round permanent use. So that's something that the applicant should address. And there are reasons for that. We've already mentioned that a SWIP is required and it remains to be provided. We had some comments on the erosion and sediment control plan that I think could be easily addressed. We've recommended that your traffic consultant review the proposed curb cuts for accessing the site. Details on the retaining wall will need to be submitted based on the height. We primarily defer to NPV and Attorney Golden's office on the ARB and ridge preservation considerations, but we did note that an ARB form needs to be submitted. And also, I think it was pretty apparent in the renderings that you saw tonight that the storage tank is going to be visible, the retaining wall, certain aspects of the lagoon. So you may want to consider colors associated with those features on the site as well. And then the last comment I had was on the generator. And I know, Tom, you kind of discussed a testing schedule tonight. It's 15 minutes on a monthly basis. I think that should be noted on the plan for the, on the site plan, and maybe even a condition of your action. But also, I'd like you to take a closer look at the code requirements for noise levels at property lines. If it's 68 at the property line, that's more than is permitted at the code by the code at night. So if the generator had to come on at night for some unforeseen circumstance, it could be out of compliance with the code. So that should be addressed. And otherwise, I think we've, have a detailed memo that the board, has if you have any questions. Otherwise, again, I think it would be really helpful to have sort of a consolidated plan and package with responses to our comments as well as others for the next submission.
If I could just make a very brief follow-up, Chris.
Yeah.
On Natalie's last comment with respect to the generator. And I guess this is directed to Tom. When did you say the testing was going to be done? I thought you said in the evening.
No, it would not be done in the evening. It would be done during the course of normal work days.
Okay. Right.
It's going to be a
I'll make
routine.
that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We haven't.
I'll make that
scheduled
part of the
anything yet.
condition as well.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, you can make that a condition of the approval is, between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. or what have you. I think that's reasonable. Obviously, we can't control when it comes on due to a power failure. That's an act of God, but the normal maintenance exercising, we can control that.
Does the planning board rather have it like between 8 and 5 during the week or 8 and 5 during the weekends?
No, it should be during the week. It shouldn't be tested
during the week.
during the weekends.
And 8 to 5 is fine to you anytime in that time frame, or you want to have it smaller time frame?
No, I think that's fine. Most people are up.
Smaller time frame.
I'm good.
What are you thinking, Evan?
I'm just thinking smaller, like a 6-hour, 7-hour time frame.
So like 10 to 5?
Yeah,
In
something
case
like
you got
that.
in case you got some late sleepers,
Yeah, exactly.
some teenagers in the neighborhood. I don't think that's a big ask to move that the testing window to 10 to 5. I know that's all computer controlled. So
I don't think it's a difficult thing to accomplish either. I think it's certainly easy.
So
Thank
I
you.
have a big question around the wastewater tank, the 55,000
Mhm.
gallon wastewater tank. One,
Mhm.
that's a lot of raw sewage potentially, and being it's on a wastewater, it's on a treatment site. Is there any sort of overspill if it cracks, if it fractures, if it freezes, and a plug blows out of it, or is that stuff just going to all go into the ground?
It's not going into the ground. Well, at this point, and I'd have to check the specifications as to whether or not we have a double wall tank in there. Usually there is a containment provided for the tank. I will confirm that, and we can certainly accommodate that. I do believe that the tank size will be reduced. It's shown here very conservatively, and we will be refining the size of that. So, it's not going to much unlike a septic tank that would be in a residential unit, only a little bit larger, and it'll be pumped out probably a little bit more regularly than a septic tank.
Okay, well, right now we're just considering what's on the plan because 55,000 gallons, that's typical 18-wheeler holds 11,000, 12,000, 16,000 gallons of the biggest. What are we if I understand we pumped out regularly, and I think that should be, if it is that size, I think it should be part of the site plan requirement that pumping and maintenance schedule, which is not uncommon that we've done to other applicants. I know there's been applicants in front of us that we've required maintenance agreements or to understand what the maintenance is going to be. But what would that be pumped out with? I mean, that's a huge amount of material.
Yeah, it would be pumped out with a typical type of septic hauler. So, the same type of truck that would come in and empty a septic tank.
But that's my question. Those are typically 6,000 to 7,000 gallons. So is that going to be a convoy of trucks, or is the maintenance going to be set up so that
we can set it up at any schedule? That's one of the reasons why I said we're going to revisit the size of that tank. And if it's something we need to do before we finalize the the site plan for your approval, we will certainly do that.
And is there any reason
Um,
the generator can't be moved to a different spot on the property that's further away from the property line?
I would have to take a look at that. It's certainly something we can consider. I think the reason it is where it is because of the location of the electric service along Seven Springs Road. So there is a transfer switch and, it is tied in with the switch gear and the main electric service. So the further back we push it from Seven Springs Road, there will be some impacts, on how we get, power to the site, but something we can look at.
Yeah, I would say that I think you should look into that just because of that radius that you're showing already is, I mean, it's already not compliant and it's right up against the property line, so that would be something to be looked into.
Coming back to the laboratory testing, if manganese and iron are being tested for, those usually involve colorimetric assays, which are more reagents than simply pH. And of course, it would be very small amounts, but they would still be present in your lab waste.
Well, just to answer the question that was raised earlier, because it's connected to your question now, the treatment facility that's being proposed as part of this approval is not intended to treat the water from well number 33. The only treatment that'll be provided will be disinfection. So the facility that's being proposed is not suitable for removal of iron and manganese. So that treatment is going to occur elsewhere. The village actually has 2 other treatment plants that do treat for iron and manganese within the village. So I think that either this water will be just disinfected or it will be treated through one of those other 2 facilities.
Yeah, but wouldn't you monitor it before you put it into the system?
We would be, but I'm not, again, and forgive me for not knowing all the details. I'm not the engineer who's developing well 33, so I'm not fully up to speed on the plan and what preliminary treatment require. There's no iron and manganese treatment provided for in the facility that we've designed.
Right, and I'm not talking about the treatment facility. I'm talking about the laboratory analysis to monitor the concentrations.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and that water is never going to enter the facility that we've designed. It's only going to enter the disinfection facility. And I don't have any details on what monitoring is proposed for that well 33 water specifically, but we can follow up and I can get that for you.
Thank you.
Is there a landscape plan that's missing or not included in that appendix or in this set of attendance?
I think what happened, Evan, is it was submitted prior to your joining the board, so you may not have it. That is what Natalie was talking about submitting a comprehensive set of plans, which is a typical practice, so that you would have that. So do you have the landscape plan that you could share on your screen so we can just go over that real quick?
I can. Just bear with me here for a second. We'll have it up in a second.
That's sheet C9A.
Yeah.
Always wish I could play the Jeopardy theme.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm checking the earlier presentation that I put together to see if there's actually a landscaping plan in there. And I don't see it. Let's see what this looks like here.
See if I have
Modified sloping.
I'll see if I have it digitally.
Yeah, it's C9A, Chris.
Okay, hold on. Hold on.
This may, yeah, you have it. So,
I'm looking now. I have the papers. I got to see where my digital copy is.
well, I can give you I don't have a shot of the plantings, but I can show you how the facility kind of overlays onto a aerial view. I don't know if that'll answer or help.
No, I found it.
See, you got it?
Yeah, I'll just wait for it to load. Okay. This is C9A from I think the revision date on this is 3/21, so I guess that's still the current plan.
Yeah, I don't think it changed to the April 19th.
Just wanted to make sure I'm sharing the right one. I don't want to. And share.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
You're welcome. So this is to reorient. This is Seven Springs up here. This is the existing chlorination plant.
Oh, no, that's to the right.
Actually, the chlorination
Right.
plant is a little bit further to the right.
To the right, this one over here.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Okay. Can you see it, Evan?
Yeah, I just have a question about, I don't have the full plan, but so how big do those trees that are proposed in front of, let me get on my north-south bearings, but on the street side, Seven Springs Road side, how big do those trees get? And are those the evergreen trees that are proposed?
Yeah, you can see on the plan right now, the schedule of the tree schedule, that's right there, the varieties of the trees. How big they get, I'd have to, get some information back to you.
What about
On,
Jonathan?
you know-
Do you happen to know, Jonathan? Well,
I know that it says the white firs are going to be 6 feet high, and there's 12 of those, and those are the largest of the symbols. If you can see, there's it says 4AC right on the. There's 4 of those white firs, and then
Mhm.
and then more on the other side.
But that's
So I
not the
think that
mature height.
the rendering was showing like 20-foot trees, or at least,
Mhm.
but they wouldn't grow to that for several years. The schedule here is that they'd be installed at 6 feet.
Yeah, that's not the mature height. You're correct. That's the installed height.
Is that on a note here that it's the installed height? Because this becomes a problem later on with inspection by the building inspector when things are installed, that it should be very clear of what they should be when they're installed.
We can clarify that. It's definitely in the project specifications, but we will, I'm sure there's a reference to, what this plant schedule means in the project specifications, which I don't believe we've provided you, but we can clarify that here.
I think Jonathan
Yeah.
touches on this in his report, and I think a lot of the
Yes.
planning board concern is going to be about screening this project from the site, especially the raw water storage tank that's down
Yeah,
here.
right by the word retaining wall that is just above someone's mouse there,
Yeah,
next to the chlorination, just below the chlorination building, there is a label that says retaining wall with an arrow.
Yeah.
And in my memorandum, I circled that area as deserving of extensive landscaping, because according to your own rendering, you're looking right down the drive. As you drive by, you'd be looking right down the driveway of the chlorination building, through the 2 fences, and then right at the top of that tank, which is depressed lower. The top of the tank's about the same level as the road. And if there was landscaping right where those words retaining wall are, just below the chlorination building, I think it would do a great deal to mitigate the view of the tank. And that's on page 4 of our memo. I circled that area.
so like the 865, 864 contour lines and like that area there.
I would plant up at the top.
Oh,
Plant above the 866, and that way the bottom of the tank is at 855. And I forget exactly how tall the tank is, but I think that would really be effective.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Evan, does that help answering your?
That helps, and I think what Jonathan is proposing is also a good idea, because obviously what I'm getting at is screening, questions about the type of tree, because, if the tree, if the type of tree is non-native or has problems, is it, what's going to happen if the tree dies, and screening and seeing the visibility of such a large structure from a residential road.
Typically what we do is we add a note to the resolution that the
Perpetuity.
has to be added in perpetuity, has to be maintained in perpetuity. That it actually has come up already at the 2 pump stations that are here, that they've had to replace plants. And if you drive by, just the screening that's there now already doesn't really cover the chlorination plant that's there. I mean, it's clearly visible from the street. So I think with this size of the structure and the type of structure, being it's going to be a metal prefab building, and I know we don't have much leeway when it comes to that, it's going to be very different in that neighborhood over there. So we're going to really want to see a lot of extra plantings to make this. It's going to help with the sound from the generator, right? If that can't be relocated, typically, and the tanks and stuff to hide the tanks.
Yeah, that 866 contour is right abutting to the asphalt. So
Yeah.
it'd have to be a little bit lower. The other thing to consider is deer resistant planting.
Yeah, they'll have to, Jonathan will go, when they submit the updated landscaping plan, we'll go through all of the species of plants and trees and shrubs and everything. And it's one of the things he checks for to make sure it's native and it's resistant and it's not going to die in a winter and stuff like that. But I'm stealing your thunder, Jonathan. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
You want to go through your?
Sure. And welcome to Mr. Pastel. I didn't have you on my email list. I hope you were able to get a copy of the memo I submitted to the planning board.
I picked everything up this afternoon from the
Okay, great.
building department. Thank you.
Our memo from NPV is dated January 14th. The first 4 comments are really echoing many of the things that Natalie has raised. We were looking for a complete new plan set. On sheet C5, we'd like the zoning and bulk area requirements to show both the required zoning standards and the proposed values for the design submitted. The underground piping to well 33 has been discussed. The need for a SWIP and estimate of the area disturbance and so forth has been discussed. On landscaping, our comment 5, I discussed the area in front of the tank as a deficit for plantings. That we've just reviewed that. Under architectural review, we need an ARB application filled out with I know that a lot of specifications were provided on that color sheet, but the ARB application is important and need that for the records. Photographs of comparable development in the neighborhood. Typically, the planning board will look at houses nearby. How do they look? What colors are they? So to look at the way this can fit in the best, we need those photograph of surrounding buildings. Ridge preservation, you are obligated to try to blend the structure into the surroundings to the maximum practical extent because it's in the ridge preservation area. The standing seam metal panels with the vertical pattern do not meet the code. If you look at the code language adopted in October 2021, we would be expecting different materials other than the metal standing seam panels, and the green color of the roof is probably a little bright, but I think that is probably adequate. But I'd like for the board to discuss specifically the material choices and colors, because I think that as this application has progressed, I think this is now like the third time we've seen it. I don't think it's approaching the look that the board has been expecting. We also question the septic drain field and why we're going to the holding tank, and we'll defer to the engineering on that. SHPO, we'd like to see if they have any comments, but perhaps that was taken care of during the previous seeker proceedings. So maybe that is not necessary, but I'd like for you to respond to that comment. And then we noted we hadn't received an FEAF, but perhaps given Mr. Golden's ruling that there's no seeker required additional work, that's not necessary. And that's our report from January 14th.
Jonathan, and also Natalie, and I spoke to Marissa earlier today, is that when we received the seeker documents, they were very, very extensive. We did not simply recirculate those to everyone because it was really primarily for the purpose of us determining whether or not this project was considered within that seeker review, and if so, if this board would be bound by the finding statement and determinations therein. And as I've told you, we did decide that it was included in that. However, there are some documents in there, such as SHPO letter and some other issues. And so Marissa and I spoke about, since it wasn't circulated to everyone, that they would look at your memos as to the documents you've asked for. Some of those are included within that seeker review, as you suggested, Jonathan. And so, Marissa, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that you will go ahead and pull out those documents and then submit them to the planning board for circulation to everyone on the documents that are being asked for that may be included in that seeker review.
That's correct, Rick. We're happy to do so.
And Rick, just I think I know my answer, but I just want to hear from you. The ridge preservation ARB laws were recently changed, as Jonathan stated. So the allowance of aluminum siding and EFIS was previously allowed. I guess that's why the building that's there is out of that material. But this project would need to conform to the new laws, correct?
You assume correctly that this project will have to conform to the revised ARB and ridge preservation.
Okay. So yeah, so the metal cladding is like a non-starter right now because it's not allowed in our code. So we're gonna have to sharpen our pencils on that. The screening is going to be another. This is while the pictures from 2019, the shrubs there haven't grown much. Actually, one of them died. That's been replaced. So landscaping, you are still in a residential neighborhood. There are all houses, one directly across the street. There are houses being built further down the road. So the landscaping is going to have to be beefed up. You can see how green the forest, the land is now, and a considerable amount of that's going to be cleared out, which is going to change the landscape. And then as far as the colors, the whites, I think there was like an almond or a white that was on your sheets. Yeah, the almond. So again, we're going to have to steer away from those colors as the new ARB and ridge preservation laws disallow those types of colors. We actually had a project on this street right down the block that they had to go and they had to change the colors of their home to more natural and neutral colors just 2 meetings ago. So it's already been enforced and being effective. So I know Marissa's looking for potentially a public hearing. I can say right now we're not there. We don't have the proper ARB application that we would need for a public hearing, including the color palette and the usually the color board that we request. and there's going to be modifications that are going to be needed to made to the landscaping plan. So if anybody else on the board feels different,
materials of the building, correct?
yes. So unless anybody else on the board feels differently, I think we're doing a disservice to the public by scheduling a public hearing at this point in the review process.
So I'm looking at this color palette. The classic green is selected, but on the rendering and some of the other materials, there was a cool leaf green and a cool Bermuda green, and it looked kind of bright. So really what the board's been looking for is very subdued earth tone colors that do exactly what the code says, which is blend as much as practical into the surrounding woods. So something more muted in color is what we're looking for, and some other type of cladding other than the vertical seamed metal panels. Perhaps some type of stone or brick or stucco.
I mean, it's I think it's fairly straightforward here, John. I don't think there's any question that this is not viewable from the viewport based on its location. So it's going to have to be wood, brick, stone, stucco, vinyl, or fiber cement board or fiber cement siding, and they all shall be non-reflective, non-glossy, earth tone, or similar neutral colors. So whatever the applicant picks, it has to be within that selection.
And Marissa, I don't know yet whether or not these modifications have made it into E-code. So if you're having difficulty finding the modifications, give me a call and we'll get them to you.
I
Yeah,
had
I just want to add, I'm sorry, I just want to add that I think that would be a good opportunity to, obviously it is a residential area, so whatever is proposed from the applicant should really take a look at what's in the surrounding area and see how it could really blend in architecturally and visually.
I also just wanted to raise a point that I kind of mentioned previously about the raw water storage tank and the other features of the site that are not just the building, that are going to be visible, and sort of proposing colors and blending of those structures, including the retaining wall. Is that something that the board wants to try to talk about now with the applicant, or, does that require, is it required to conform to the current ridge preservation laws? I'm not sure how detailed that gets as far as structures or buildings. Rick, maybe you can help with that.
Did anybody scale out the height or know the height of the retaining wall?
While they're doing that, Natalie, is that everything that is new that's being proposed, not existing, but new is being proposed, will be subject to the new ARB and ridge preservation laws.
The reason I'm asking for the height of the wall is twofold, because I think if we go over 6 feet, it needs an engineering sign off, and then I think a 1 foot retaining wall versus 6 or 7 foot retaining wall is going to change what materials or look we should have there.
So we did request some details on the retaining walls, and it would be helpful to kind of have a profile of it. But based on the grading, it's, the top of the wall could be 864 and the bottom is 852. So approximately 12 feet, which does require a detailed engineer's design, for review by the building department.
Also, the face of that wall is going to face away from the road or to the south, right? Because it's going downhill. So I don't think you're going to I don't think that retaining wall is going to be visible unless you're inside the site. Do I have that correct?
It seemed like there was actually where you were proposing the landscaping in front of the storage tank. It seemed like the retaining wall could be visible in that area as well, but to be confirmed.
Well, in other words, I don't know that this retaining wall visually is as big a problem as some of the other elements.
Yeah, but I thought on one of the renderings that was shown to us, you saw the retaining wall from the street.
Yeah, I think one of them see the retaining wall from the street.
Okay, well. But certainly more can be done to screen the tank in the area that I had suggested, and the building design can be adjusted to blend into the hillsides.
Right, but the applicant will need to provide a sample of the material they're going to use for the retaining wall. That's just
Yep,
something
that's true too.
we've customarily done with every applicant that's been in front of us.
Agreed.
Are there lighting plans that are not in this submission that I'm missing? Yes?
I think
The
that
lighting
they
is
were
all-
in the one of the problems is I think they were in one submission and then not another. And that's one of the things that led to Natalie and I to comment that we need a consolidated site plan set. There's like a newer plan set that had four less sheets than the previous one.
All right, so the rest of the planning board, we've talked about materials, we've talked about colors, I think we've given some guidance on colors. About landscaping. What else, everybody?
Did you talk about trucks and maintenance? You talked about trucks maintenance at least, or
We did previous, when they're previously in front of us. About the, what are those not lagoons that are gonna have to be cleaned out periodically.
Yeah.
But they represented that, it will just be, dual axle dump trucks that I believe are gonna come in. I don't know, I don't remember the schedule on it, but they were gonna come in and they would clean the lagoons out and haul the waste away in those, right? If I remember correctly.
Yes, you're correct. There's going to be chemical deliveries to the treatment chemicals. There's going to be residual removal, which is going to be basically the sediment that's removed from the water. It'll be pulled out of the lagoons, and miscellaneous maintenance deliveries for equipment maintenance and things of that nature.
But as far as Evan, as far as times and deliveries, that will all be part of site plan and resolution. I don't think we're going to allow chlorine deliveries at 2:00 in the morning. It's just not fair to the neighbors across the street.
In response to Mr. Yan's question, back last January when we got plans, there were lighting photometric plans on sheets E26 and E27, and then later submissions didn't have those sheets.
okay.
So if you look back earlier, you'll find the lighting plans.
Yeah, Mr. Yan wasn't with us for that.
Yeah, I think we do need a conform set.
Tommy, anything from?
No, right now I'm all good. I actually had a question for Natalie. You mentioned in your report, Natalie, about the drawdown on the wells when they were doing a 72-hour test.
Yes.
How much of a drawdown? I mean, was it, to the point where it was noticeable to residents, or?
No, it
That
was.
is, okay.
Yes, so there was drawdown. I think it was observed in 3 neighboring
Yeah,
wells
3,
that
yeah,
were
3 of the
monitored.
wells.
And Tom, perhaps you can chime in if any of this is incorrect. But at the time that the DEC was reviewing the application, the village actually engaged a hydrogeologist to also review the reports. So everybody at the time was satisfied with this
Okay.
complaint response and monitoring program.
All right.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Michael, any final parting thoughts from you on this application?
No, I'd like to see all the consolidated information though, as people were talking about.
Yeah, and I think that will be helpful as 2/5 of the board have changed hands since your last presentation in front of us. Evan, anything else?
I don't know much about water treatment plants, but do they have are there any noticeable fumes or anything from a distance?
There shouldn't be, no.
Rick, any final parting thoughts on this application? You're muted.
The only thing that I think we haven't addressed is there was that request for a GML 239 referral. So I mean, certainly at this stage, we have referred, with the information we have referred other applications, but I didn't know whether or not you wanted to do that now or wait until this coordinated and consolidated submittal would take place, and then you could make a GML 239 based upon that. I would think in addition to the plan sets that we would normally send over there, either the ones we have now or consolidated set on the next submission, is that we would send over the seeker information, probably on a thumb drive, to the Orange County Planning Department, and the particulars of how to get the numbers of plan sheets that we want, and the seeker documents to be in a acceptable format to send to the Orange County Planning Department, I think could be orchestrated between Marissa's office and our office. But the big thing now is, do you think that it's ready now for a GML referral, or do you want to wait until the consolidated plan?
I think the consolidated plan is going to make it easier for the county to review, and so they're not flipping back and forth between plan sets. I see a nod out of Evan. Okay. So I think we wait. I think we wait on the 239 then.
But that could probably be done at the next submission then, I would
Yeah,
think.
I agree with you. I think a lot can be done. I think both the public hearing based on what is resubmitted to us and the 239 could probably be done at the next meeting based on whatever information we get back.
Coming back to Evan's comment about the chlorine, is this delivered as chlorine gas or sodium hypochlorite?
Sodium hypochlorite.
Thanks.
Anything else from the board for this applicant? All right. Marissa, anything from your team?
No, we understand that we need to submit a full sheet set, plus some additional information that you requested. We will look more into the potential of changing that material and color spec sheet for you, presenting more concrete options that work with your newly enacted ARB provisions. I will note, however, that again, I think we've stated this before, we're willing to work with that, but understanding it is a water treatment facility, it's not a recreational facility or retail or something else that is, we're very willing to go forward and look at colors and materials as we've said before. So we will come back with something that we hope is more suitable to the board and its consultants.
All right.
I have nothing to add other than
Okay.
my thanks for your attention.
Thank you for your presentation and your time this evening. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda, Woodbury Shops, Woodbury Centers, review additional documents submitted, special permit and ARB for proposed conversion of a large retail space, formerly Modell's, internally subdivided into multiple boutique stores. Said property is located at 23 Center Drive in Central Valley and is known on the Village of Woodbury tax map as section 225, block 2, lot 1.1.2. Mr. Anderson.
Good evening. And I thought 4 items on the agenda was going to be small or short. So it's good to see everyone again.
You just never know. The things you think are going to take 5 minutes parlay into an hour-long conversation, and the hour-long are the 5-minute conversations.
That's it. I was so happy we were number 2. No, that's good. Well, just to bring everybody up to speed, do you need any more introduction other than what you gave, Mr. Garber, or do you want me to just go through the adjustments that?
Let's just dive right into it and get into the adjustments and stuff.
Would it be okay if I share my screen?
Go right ahead. You should have permission.
Okay, so hopefully everybody can see what's on the screen. So there is actually a rather large adjustment that we were able to make based on the discussions we had last time, as well as finding a discrepancy in our drawings on the existing conditions. So if you notice here, one of the biggest adjustments that we were able to make was that at the rear of the building, we eliminated all stairs. So we were able to do that because as we got back into the existing conditions, there was something blocking us in this location that created a false sense that it was a raised slab there, when in reality, at these locations, there are existing doors here, a double door and a single egress door that exit right to grade. So we reconfigured the inside of the building so that we did not need to do anything at the rear of the building, and instead we're able to utilize those same points for means of egress. So that, I think, solved a tremendous amount of the issues that were raised last time. So essentially the dock area remains active just as it currently is. The exiting from Chico's goes through this existing corridor, which remains just as it is. And egress for our spaces here basically happen accessible means of egress at the entry, second accessible means of egress here on the left-hand side. And then in the event of an emergency, this can also act as a third point of egress, but primarily this is for the tenants that are using that space. So that's probably the biggest adjustment that you can see. And I think that probably addresses most of the comments that we heard, but I know there are also letters that we received as well, which I think speak to a few of those points.
Yeah, that's definitely cleaned the back of the building up for
Yeah.
sure.
Big time.
Yeah, really the only exterior improvements are this, basically the sign. We've got the window at the front, and I'll zoom in here. We shifted this door over just a little bit to try and even out some of the spaces. So this was the existing double door. It actually goes into this, and we just slid that over.
No,
And
no,
that's-
see, that changes the whole plan. I think we got to start all over again.
Oh, no, please. No, but that's, yeah, so it really did help quite a bit. The other thing that we added, I failed to mention, is you'll notice the fire department connection here. So we're looking at this more like a dry standpipe that slides out. So we'd have the same fire department connection, but one that can drain away, frost-proof. That way, if it's a little bit easier to get to as opposed to right at the building.
Yeah, I think that will be helpful for them because that if you're not 5 pounds, you're not getting between those two staircases.
That's it. That's it. I think that's most of the changes on this one.
Yeah.
That's a
We
quick
have-
question. Just, sorry, this is not directly planning related, but is that kind of a dead end condition in the corridor on the right side? On
This side, no,
all those, the bottom
we-
ones, the bottom right, that corridor.
This corridor here. So this, we come in here, this is a second means of egress corridor that goes basically out to this location. So you can either, and if you're in here, you can come out in this location as well.
But that's not a dead end condition where people might go into that corridor and then have to turn back around?
No, we use this in, like, we're redoing the Newburgh Mall actually right now. And this is what we have behind all interior malls.
Yeah.
Same condition. But we'll go through the code review and address all of that during the building department review as well.
This might have been covered before, but I have a simple question about the doors. Are they automatic opening the same way that Michael's is, or are they manual opening?
No, these are manual opening. But they will conform to the 5-pound accessibility requirements. Actually, on the exterior door, we're able to go up to 15.
Yeah, that's the requirement, but it would be easier for people to have access if there were automatic opening, like on the store next door at Michael's.
Good point. At this point, we're not calling to replace any of these doors here. So we're not adjusting anything at this point on that. We're leaving the existing as is in this.
Yeah, I was gonna say
proposal.
those are existing, right? Those are the existing Modell's doors.
But the existing vestibule, the only adjustment is this glass here. At this point.
Are you good? I think those, you went over your changes, right? Just so that I can go to our consultants then? Okay.
Yep.
Natalie?
We're good.
Yep. So basically what Jason described, having removed the stairwells kind of addresses a lot of the board's prior comments on circulation and access around the stairwells and utility conflicts. We did have a question in our memo about whether or not the access in the rear was intended for employees only, or just for employees in emergencies, or also for normal consumer entrances. Understanding the area that's being indicated with the mouse now is obviously for employees only, but are the others? I mean, there is some dumpster storage and then existing utilities there. I just was curious if that was the
This is just in
intention.
the event of an emergency.
Okay. It's up to the planning board's discretion whether or not you want that identified on the plan, and also perhaps signage interior as well, if you think that's required or not. The other comments that we had, although we primarily defer to your traffic consultant on the parking and the access, we've asked that the plans be clear, indicating that there's no net change to parking as a result of this application, thereby, eliminating the need for an additional waiver, which exists at this site. We also discussed rooftop equipment and screening, and that's something that at your last meeting, or the applicant's last appearance, you confirmed is within the planning board's purview and something that needs to be addressed prior to their approval. The applicant is advising that the proposed rooftop equipment will be screened by the parapet as shown. We don't necessarily take any exception to that and think that there are mechanisms for the planning board to enforce that if you think that that's sufficient. So we've suggested that all rooftop equipment shall be screened by the existing parapet, and also added the contingency that shall not be visible from the parking lot, but the planning board could certainly consider another view shed that they believe is appropriate. We did have other comments about the interior layout and some maybe conflicts with doors proposed where the Chico's space is, and also shown room 12. You can sort of see the conflict, how the doors open there. Also, we noted that from prior plans, the existing conditions were slightly different. So it may be that there's actually an extended corridor into the Chico's space that takes care of that. And then the only other thing I think that's worth mentioning is that this revised plan, I think it actually results in an additional showroom. Is that correct, Jason? It's 15 instead of 14.
Correct.
So just so that the board understands that the magnitude changed slightly. And I think, again, the rest of our comments are relatively minor that can be addressed by a disposition letter from the applicant for a future submission. Unless you have any questions for me, that's all I have.
Thank you, Natalie. Anybody from the board have questions for Natalie? No?
If I could
Okay.
just mention one thing, Mr. Gerver.
Yeah.
This is an existing door here. This condition, actually, this is what happens now. We don't mind removing that. We just left that door as it was. So this does not need a second means of egress, this small showroom.
Jason, sorry.
Let's just say put pocket doors in. You won't have conflicts anymore.
That's it. We're tough with egress.
Sorry, Natalie.
No, it's okay. It may have been slightly revised since a prior revision. Like I said, it may not be a conflict at all. I just, if you want to just check that, Jason, on your earlier existing conditions plan.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, we'll go to Jonathan then.
Yes, you have a memo from NPV dated January the 12th, a relatively clean memo. Not that many comments left at this point. Our comment 2 on landscaping, I don't believe the board handled this, but there's actually an existing requirement for a 5-foot deep landscape bed along the front of this building, but that was never done by the previous tenants or the shopping center, and they've asked that the requirement in 310-27C3 be waived, And I have no problem with you waiving this requirement. But I believe that needs to take place. We no longer have any problems with the wall sign. The building inspector's ruling is you can use the entire frontage multiplied by the wall height. And we now find that the wall sign meets code, and it appears the pylon sign panel changes are okay with the code as well. Architectural review, we have no problems with the change in signage in the door. And that's really all of our comments.
Thank you. I believe with the landscaping, Jonathan, we have to consider it a pre-existing non-conforming. So, because we don't actually have the ability to waive it. So it was never done. So we have to just, I guess, deal with it. That's what's there already.
If that's okay with Mr. Golden, that's the way that'll work as well.
Yes, Chris is absolutely correct.
Okay. Any questions from the team from Jonathan? Or Jonathan, sorry. Okay, Phil, long time no talk.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. We have a memo or a letter from January 14th on this application. So the Kimley Horn had done a comprehensive traffic and parking that covers this application, the Fresh Market application, and it also included some of the traffic projections for the Popeyes. So that, did a comparison of all the trip generation, did a qualitative analysis of some of the internal intersections, and not so much for this application, but for the whole site, analyzed Route 17 and Center Drive, and showed that any minor net changes in total traffic generation could be accommodated at that intersection. Our main focus, and I think on what Jason described tonight, cleans up the area near the loading areas, because that was an area that we were concerned about, the types of deliveries now with more smaller stores, the types of deliveries that might occur, and that we have enough area there. So I think overall that makes it a lot cleaner in some of those real tight areas on the circulation around the rear of the building. One thing that we think the board should consider, whether it's for this application or both this application and the Woodbury Fresh Market, is we really want to make sure. I mean, I think there's already a talk about a condition that all deliveries of course have to occur in the rear, but we thought it might be useful to put some signing on Center Drive, just maybe 2 signs, all deliveries, so that we don't end up with any deliveries in front of Kohl's or any of the stores, and then they have to come back out and go around the back. So our thought was, and again, this is up to the board, but maybe just 2 signs. So as traffic comes in off of 17, something directing all deliveries down to the rear, to try to maintain that pretty much counterclockwise circulation path around the site. So again, I don't think it has to be oversigned, but maybe the addition of 2 signs just indicating all deliveries, and because you may have some smaller deliveries or more deliveries that may vary over time, and I think it would be helpful.
So Phil, you would say one up like where the island is when you first come in?
Yep.
And then down like at that next.
Yes. So somewhere just, down in that area. Yep.
Do you think anyone will cut across Aldi that short way?
Yeah, well, we could put one there just to to direct them. That's where we don't want them to end up. So we could put a sign just there, directing the deliveries down to the next, around the back of the building. So maybe it's 3 signs, one as you come in immediately, then one just near where you're approaching the intersection with Aldi, and then the one, with the kind of left arrow directing them around the back of the building.
Land?
Would that be a one-way, you're suggesting, a one-way all the way around?
It's
Where the well is. No,
that's the way it pretty much functions. I think it's more of just
Well of what?
directing the
There's a
trucks
well
so that
there.
they don't end up in the front of the store.
Yeah.
What's that feedback?
If you could mute Mr. Mosheg.
I'm
Yeah, I think-
working on it.
There we go. So I think, it's generally a counterclockwise pattern.
You would think.
If a vehicle did come around the other way, that's fine, but we really just we want to make sure they don't end up in front of Aldi, Kohl's, and in that area. So I think, a sign up on Center as you come in, and then maybe 2 signs, one right near Aldi, so we make sure that they don't turn there, that they
Deliveries this way.
continue down. And then one down right at the rear there of Aldi and around.
Yeah, you just have to make sure that the people delivering to the hotel don't get mixed up.
Yeah, I mean, the sign can be,
You could have a hotel delivery, hotels straight.
yeah, it can be the first 2 signs can just be, all deliveries. And then when we get to the sign at the easterly side or southeasterly side of
Right
Aldi,
there.
we could have, hotel deliveries straight ahead, could be a 2
Exactly, yep.
section sign.
All right, so I like where you're going, but I want to just grab the screen from you real quick. The only issue I see with that is these loading docks are in the right direction, right? If a
Yeah.
truck comes down, they pull around, right? They can back in here. All these,
Right,
if
go
they
the other
come
way.
down, they got to go so they're not going to pull a 3-point turnoff with the 52-foot
Yep.
trailer. So they're going to have to go down Center Drive and back in then.
Well,
How are they doing it now?
They
I think
can,
honestly, I think they're coming this way.
yeah, they're coming
They're
around
backing in.
clockwise.
I see what you're saying.
So while it works for the fresh and for the new here, do we just screw up all these now?
Either
Phil,
that, unless you, instead of having them come down the way Phil's suggesting right now, just come the opposite way.
or is it possible to just have a sign that restricts deliveries
Yeah.
where the Aldi's entrance is? Say, no deliveries permitted, and then therefore they have to go either the one-way clockwise or the one-way
Yeah.
counterclockwise?
Yeah, we could do that. We could just
Do a
sign
counterclockwise.
that drive aisle. We don't want them in front of the store. So it could be, no
Right.
deliveries. It could be as simple as that. I think, over time, most of the deliveries, they have the pattern worked out, but we just don't want any stray deliveries coming in front of the stores. So,
Well,
So
how about
more
deliveries-
generic,
how
all
about
deliveries in rear.
deliveries coming in and going counterclockwise?
That's what I think he's saying. The sign would be generic, all deliveries in rear.
But
Yeah.
that might not stop people. I mean, are we trying to stop trucks from driving through the parking lot?
No, I think we're trying to stop trucks parking in
Just
front of the
loading.
fire lane
Yeah.
and delivering in
And
through
it-
the front doors and stuff like that. I think that's the bigger concern.
yes. And especially, near the fresh market, because what happens is with the supermarkets, you have more people with the carts, and it's a little bit different mix than with some of the other retailers. So that's why we don't want them in the front of the stores.
Yeah, especially like with those box trucks, you get all those, the Pepperidge
Oh,
Farm
sure.
and the bread trucks and all that. Then
Yep.
is that something your client would be amenable to? I don't think it's really that big of an ask.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And, it's, the nice thing is this has been established for many years already.
Yeah.
And this is just probably going to follow the same route. I'd like to also introduce John Canning with Kimley Horn, who's with us as well. So if he has anything else to add, I appreciate that. I think you have to unmute yourself, John.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I was just going to echo what you said. We're working with Phil. The bottom line is we don't want trucks in the front where the customers are. We want to keep them around the back.
Okay, so I think we could do a condition that they'll comply with signage per the village's traffic consultant. And I'll let you and Phil and John and that could
Yeah.
straighten those details out. Is the board okay with that? And they'll work that out to the best of their ability?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Phil, I didn't mean to cut you off. Anything else with traffic for the boutiques?
I think we're good.
Okay. So Rick, I think we're with public hearing 239 Sika, find out some ARB. So potentially we could authorize you to draft the resolution, but we could take no action on it, correct? Until the moratorium is listed? You're on mute. I gotta get that coffee
Thank
mug.
you.
Unmute.
Yeah, you're on mute mug.
I type a lot during these meetings for notes, so I try not to interrupt by having my mic on. I think, though, one of the important things that should be on the plans is this whole issue of the signage for deliveries. Other than that, I think we're pretty well set with drafting a resolution. But again, do you want us to draft it and just have it sit until the moratorium is lifted?
I mean, I think that's the fair and right thing to do. The application, in my point, is finished. They've complied with everything we've asked them to do, I think, especially cleaning up the rear of the building and getting rid of all those staircases. That was a big thing.
That's huge. Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't go stale, right, Rick? And
No, it doesn't go stale. If something
We've
happens
done,
in the
we've done that with
interim,
other applicants, haven't we?
excuse me?
Haven't we done that with some other applicants recently? Have it ready to go, it's drafted, and then when the
No,
moratorium is
we
lifted.
normally don't draft them until we're getting close to whatever meeting they're going to be on.
Okay.
As soon as we get notice what the agenda is, then we'd go ahead and look to see what we have to do as far as drafting resolutions. And practically that's what would happen here. But so what would happen is you'd authorize us to draft a resolution. When it's next put on the agenda, if the moratorium is lifted, there will be you'll have the resolution ahead of that meeting in time for you to review it.
yeah, I think that's what I was getting at. So we don't have to have them on the agenda just to authorize you to draft a
Yeah.
resolution, to
Correct.
have them come back again to go over the resolution. I think that's all we're looking to
That's what I
do.
was getting at
Okay, yeah,
also.
I agree with that.
Okay. Before we get there, does the board have any other concerns on this particular application?
I just want to reiterate on this one and also on the Woodbury Fresh, that I would be happier with automatic opening doors. It's not a reason to reject the application, but I think it would be more welcoming to people.
We appreciate that comment.
I'll be honest, the doors there or the rest of those buildings there are all, other than the other side where the supermarket is, are all hand doors except for Michael's. So
And Fresh will be automated. That one is automated.
okay.
Michael, to answer your question, although there sometimes circumstances warrant that you may require an applicant to change something that isn't actually part of their plan, that is something existing that they're not adjusting. Typically, if they're not adjusting something, that you don't simply use it as a way to say, well, let's improve what was previously approved and that relied upon. If it somehow interacts with it, let's say that they couldn't have a good route of ingress and egress without automatic doors, so that it does, the current plan does affect that, then that would be an opportunity normally that you would go ahead and do that. But it doesn't seem here that that's the situation. It's just that you would rather see automatic doors when they had a right to build what they did, which was manual doors.
Right, I understand that. That's why I said I don't think it's a reason for rejection. It was a comment, not a question.
Oh, okay. I thought you asked, is it a reason for rejection? So I
No,
Yeah,
apologize.
I thought I heard the same thing too.
No, I'm sorry. It is not a reason for rejection.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments or concerns as far as the shops, Woodbury shop, sorry.
Get the right applicant, Chris.
The name is gonna be the death of me. So I'll offer a motion to have council draft a resolution when the moratorium is lifted and the applicants put back on the agenda.
I'll second that.
Second by Tommy. Any questions? You have a question, Mike?
No, I'm voting
okay.
yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. All right. Moving on.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Woodbury Fresh, review additional documents submitted for site plan, special permit and ARB, a proposed conversion of two existing retail spaces into specialty supermarket. Said property is located within the Woodbury Center at 30 Center Drive in Central Valley and is known on the Village of Woodbury tax maps as section 235, block 2, lot 1.12. I presume again you, Mr. Anderson, right?
Yes, it's me again. Sorry about that. Yeah, so we've addressed a few comments, added some turning lanes or some turning movement diagrams, a few other things as well. Reviewed the letters that have come back. Probably the biggest thing, this has been a little while since we've had this application. We added, showed information on the generator, which has a acoustical enclosure, sound attenuating enclosure. Listening to one of the previous applicants, we're under the decibel levels anywhere actually within 7 meters of that generator. So that's something that's now shown, specified, and that's set to be on the roof. Beyond that, we've been looking at particularly traffic. I think that's been one of the bigger items, trying to address that and look at that. So we'd like to have an opportunity to discuss that, as well as the access in front of the building, crosswalks, things such as that, and how that'll be used. Finally, I think the last point is with vehicular traffic around the back. One of the things that we showed, because we were requested, was the turning movements for a large box truck for the delivery vans. But those, I mentioned in a previous meeting, but those delivery vans are really just sprinters. They have to go into people's driveways, so they're sprinters and regular vans that you'd see typically that ShopRite and others use. So that's something a little bit different, but we'd like to discuss and share on the screen to see where we'd store those vans and address some of the other comments. But that's in a nutshell where we are today.
Okay, thank you. You want to go? Let's go right into Natalie.
All righty. So at their last appearance, that was in October, the applicant and the board considered certain comments related to the circulation of the site, parking, operations within the store, including food deliveries and cart storage. So those are some considerations that you discussed then. I do want to talk about the traffic movement around the loading dock area in the back, given that this is an addition. The plans appear to show that the movements will be restricted to one-way traffic in that area, and the applicant's representation in their comments is that traffic is infrequent and delivery limited to delivery in emergency vehicles. But I'm not sure that that's necessarily something that they can confirm unless it's studied. But we did note that it seems like it could be possible if additional parking stalls were removed and the striping was adjusted, that there is a potential to maintain two-way traffic in that area. So we've recommended that the board consider that with input from your traffic consultant, and kind of outweigh the benefit of a loss in parking in the back of the building to maintaining two-way traffic there. We had comments on the box truck turning movement, so I think that's kind of where Jason was leading with his discussion here. It seems that obviously, you can see in the plan that there's some overlap with the curb there. There's also a guardrail in that location. So whatever the vehicle is that is intended to be in that space should be able to maneuver without having that overlap. So whether or not that can be adjusted, just by simple adjustment of the turning movement, that's great. But the other thing we noticed is you can kind of see how if that's parked, that vehicle is parked in that location, it's abuts right up against the striping. So, you know, again, that limits movement in that area again to one way or restricts it altogether. If it's a larger truck, it appears. So we've kind of asked the applicant and the planning board to consider, you know, is this addition necessary? Is there a way to reconfigure it to maintain movements around that in that area while trucks are parked? Because certainly they will be parked and, you know, there for a half hour, an hour. What happens if another car or vehicle comes in the area? You know, do they have to back up and turn around? You know, maybe it's a reconfiguration of where the loading docks are or the number, just certain things to consider to kind of maintain traffic movement there. And again, we totally defer to Collier's input on that as well. Similar to the other application, although the parking analysis is demonstrated for the entire site, including Popeyes, there is an existing waiver for parking at this site. So this plan needs to kind of clearly demonstrate what waiver is being requested as part of this action. And I think that just kind of helps tracking everything moving forward. What else did I have? Oh, at the last meeting, and something that Jason touched upon, the applicant has stated that there will be deliveries from the store, you know, individual deliveries for people that have placed orders online. So storage of delivery vans needs to be addressed. The water and sewer service will be provided by others, the Village of Harriman for water and Orange County Sewer District for sewer. We've been copied on correspondence from them within the last couple of days asking for revisions to the plans where the sewer main will be relocated. We're going to be kind of tracking those revisions, but no, you know, the review is subject to their approval, and think that there are certain conditions that you could take as part of your action, such as, you know, prior to plan signing, confirmation from the Village of Harriman and Orange County Sewer District is required for consent to the plans last reviewed dated such and such. And that makes sure all of their comments are addressed, and you know, your planning board is considering, you know, all of the plans that need to go to the building department for monitoring this. We had some minor comments on stormwater and grading that we think can be easily addressed. This application with respect to screening rooftop equipment is a little more unknown at this time. There isn't an existing parapet that's going to screen the rooftop equipment, and the applicant has represented that they don't know what rooftop equipment is proposed at this time. So we've tried to come up with some potential conditions for the planning board to consider, or even things that the applicant could consider for you to sort of make a determination on that. You know, perhaps there's means for a general requirement that the applicant should comply with, say, the rooftop equipment may not be visible from the parking lot or other appropriate view shed. Alternatively, or in addition to that, perhaps you could ask the applicant to present methods of screening that could be employed if rooftop equipment then becomes visible, such as, you know, fencing or lattice, including colors and materials. So, and yes, you can see that there is some equipment existing that's visible. I don't know if that's proposed for removal and then something new for this space, or if that's proposed to remain. But again, it's up to the planning board to decide what's acceptable for screening circumstances such as this. So, and also I think it's the applicant's responsibility to propose something that you can consider. We did review the information provided on the generator. We found that acceptable. We did recommend that the testing schedule and the requirement for the sound attenuating enclosure be included on the plan. We noted that the ramp at the exterior of the building is proposed, and it seems that as though that this could be proposed for pedestrian access. If you look at Google Earth imagery, there's a number of dumpsters in that location. So I just wanted the applicant to kind of confirm whether or not those dumpsters are going to be relocated, or if they were going to restrict, you know, access to that area for employees or emergencies only. And And I think that was kind of the bulk of our comments that I wanted to sort of bring to the planning board's attention. Unless there are any questions or concerns, happy to answer them.
Anybody else find it ironic that we're talking about traffic flow and there's an illegally parked car on the aerial shot?
That's why so much for signs, right?
We're talking about turning radius and traffic flow, and I'm like, oh, look at that. There's a car parked right in the striping as we're talking about all this.
Can only do so much, right? We try.
The license plate didn't say Tommy D, did it?
No. I think it said RG though. ESQ. So I don't know who that is. All right. Does anybody have questions?
Mystery man.
Yeah. Anybody have questions for Natalie on her report?
If I could weigh in on
Yeah.
the last item that Natalie was talking about with respect to the rooftop structures. I think it's problematic to sort of just give a general requirement that they have to comply with the code, that it can't be seen, because they then put them up and it can be seen, then they'll have to take them down or provide other measures, et cetera. I think that, especially because this is subject to the moratorium as well, I think that the usual way that you address these things should be followed here, and that is that they provide some renderings with views of, where you want them to have views from, parking lot or wherever, and then determine whether or not they do or do not provide the screening that's required. And so I think that they should have submittals with respect to where they're placing it, the size of them, and how they're going to be screening them, and that the board should look at that prior to approval rather than after.
Yeah, that's a good point. I would add that I think in addition to rendering sections with sight lines that, cross the parapet so you can see the height, because obviously it's a supermarket, so you might have a large giant condenser farm on dunnage or something. That sort of sight line would be helpful in addition to the rendering.
Yeah, so just to that point, I appreciate both of those comments. And I believe Natalie did actually in her letter indicate the same, to provide a detail that would show that. So we definitely can do that. In fact, we've got standard screening that we're able to put up, have a color that works, and we can show that in the rendering that we already have. The one thing, of course, is that as you get up to the main road there, you're pretty much almost at roof, well, maybe not at roof level, but you're pretty high. So I think the question becomes, as you look back, how far are we going to try to avoid that? I don't think anybody's going to see it from, of course, the road, but we'll definitely provide those very simply, actually.
I think that it's, to make a good point, is what I was also referencing, is that I think you need to know for your submittal where the planning board wants you to be looking from, whether that's the parking lot, whether that's across the street, whether that's from a flyover. But I think the planning board should give you some direction as to where they want you to view it. And then you'd comply with your submittal and do it from those view points.
Oh, isn't technically everything viewable on the roof if we do flyovers?
Not unless you don't look down.
Well,
I can
even
do a
coming down
flyover.
Route 6, you see the rooftops there. It doesn't matter how you try to,
Right, and that's why, I
yeah.
added that really as something that wouldn't make sense for you to say you're going to include that, and I don't think that was the intent of the requirement for the rooftop screening. But it's up to the board what they believe. It seems to me that it would mean that cars driving by and in the parking lot and pedestrians wouldn't see these things, that it would be an attractive appearance.
I think probably from the island would be the entry island.
Which island? No,
Yeah, where you mouse it. Oh, down, right there. Go to the left. Go to the left.
Go left.
Up. Right there.
Right here? Okay.
I think that
No,
pretty tough.
I'm pointing at my screen like you can see what I'm doing. Go
I
down
saw it,
Center
man.
Drive.
Then a triangle.
Yeah, the triangle. There you go.
So just at
I
one
don't know.
point, or you want like 2 or 3 points?
Well, the other points would be 32, coming down the mountain on Route 6, right? Coming
but
down the
you're
mountain on
above-
Route 6, you see rooftops of them all.
Right.
Yeah, but I don't think there's really anything they're gonna be able to do. I mean, you can see what's
Nothing,
up
no.
there.
Unless
Now,
put
I
like,
think,
like a mass shooter camouflage on top, you know?
yeah, I think worry about what it looks like from the parking lot itself,
Yeah, you could
you
see
know, as
everything.
people drive in and look.
Right, but it should be taken from a view that's not behind some trees, so that the trees are providing the camouflage. It should be,
Look,
Those are
that
like,
view right there is actually elevated over the trees.
yeah, that's why I was
Yeah.
saying that diamond there.
Is the intent of the code to screen it or not to see it at all?
I think the code reads that it should be screened in a manner satisfactory to the planning board, but don't quote me.
Believe it, where the mouse just was to the left over there, where Staples is. In that
Staples
viewing,
units.
that's all, no, yeah, keep scrolling in. That up on rooftop there is all visible, correct? To the left?
Yeah.
Yep,
And that's all Staples and
yeah.
Waterford. And
Well,
these are the existing ones for Forever 21.
I would think from that elevation, that point of view, just some kind of screening to try to
Yeah.
hide it.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
my preference for the vantage point would be from the crossroad that's about a third of the way into the parking lot. Just outside where
So-
that red car is.
So that would be, I think we should have them taken from 2 different spots then, Mike. We should have them taken from the triangle when you come in, and then from that crossroad that you're talking about there.
right? That's the crossroad we're at, I believe.
Yeah.
So we could do that.
That's down lower than
Yeah, it is
the
down
island.
lower. So here you can see the
Yeah,
units here.
it's more like pulling in, but like you said, Chris, where the triangle is. Where
Yeah, so I'm
Dunkin'
thinking
Donuts is.
those,
Yeah,
I think those 2 spots, the triangle and that crossroad section there.
I'm standing at the crossroads here, and so you can see those are the existing units that are there that were intended to remain. We can put screening in front of those. It's simple, actually. It's pre-made. We can get it whatever color, and it will stand in front of those to hide those. Our intent for anything that's for anything new, which is any refrigeration and all, would be behind the raised parapet here. That's a significant parapet at the front.
I think that's the board's bigger concern is the refrigeration units and the rooftop
Exactly.
generator.
And we've already discussed that internally. And so if you take a look, where am I now? Let's go to
Making me
the-
seasick is what you're doing.
I know, I'm sorry. I should warn you before I scroll around. So this is the large parapet right here. So
Yeah.
you can see the general units line it. So it's really as obvious and makes perfect sense. And it's over our refrigeration is to put it right here in the center.
All right,
So
so I think
it's-
we want to see what that's going to look like with those units up there. Because also,
Chris?
yep, I heard somebody.
I was just suggesting, one of the reasons I was thinking of a couple of different vantage points, including the sides, is that if you take both of them head on, it's only really going to give you one viewpoint, even 2 different places, but still it may look very easily hidden completely behind the large parapet. But if you go over to, say, closer to Staples, I guess it is, and you look up, will you see this huge refrigeration unit?
But I hear where you're going, but what I get worried about is if you try to camouflage what's up there from every angle, are you all of a sudden drawing attention? Like, it comes to a point where I think
you
the
have a big
camouflage
fence up
actually,
there.
yeah. Hey, don't look up here. We're trying not to make you see what's up here. You get,
So what I was going to propose was, it's simple metal screening. We use it regularly for exactly this purpose. And what I was going to recommend is we start it here. We'll keep it the same color as the facade, and it will run straight across there. So it doesn't matter what really happens behind. It'll look like just a step back, simple wall, and it's meant specific for that purpose. And it really wouldn't matter then at what angle. Now, that being said, coming off Route 6 and all the rest of coming down the mountain,
You're not gonna be able to hide it coming down the mountain.
I think
I don't think that was the intent of the statute. The statute,
Yeah.
that Route 6 has been there for a long time, and they knew what this facility was going to, or this land was going to be eventually developed. So I don't think a view from the flyover makes any sense whatsoever, because I don't think it's consistent with a reasonable reading of that provision.
But Jason, let me ask you this. You're proposing like from Lennox, from the L up there, where the brick is, over to the right, have
Yeah,
like a
usually-
fencing?
It's essentially it's slatted, and because you have to get airflow, and it usually stands about 3 to 4 feet off. It's a minimum of 3, but generally keep it with 4 or 5 feet off, so for maintenance. And you basically, from whatever view, it goes along. This is an EPDM roof, so it's got big feet at the bottom.
My only concern with
weighted
that
down.
is if you whoever's got the mouse, if you go to the left, the rest of that is not going to have that though, correct?
Yeah, we'll be the only ones.
Ah,
Yeah, I really think we need to see it in a rendering, because we may,
yeah. You need
I
some
think that the
uniformity.
best of intentions are there, but I think when you see it, it may draw more attention than,
Especially if it's only like in between Staples and Aldi's, that portion, having that fencing up.
So
It's like when you put-
we'll do the. Yeah, we'll do that for you. We have the renderings already created, so it's very quick and a simple process.
all right, thank you. Yeah, otherwise I think sometimes it turns into, hey, why'd you put the area rug over that?
What are you
spot?"
trying to hide?
Yeah.
How to avoid that.
Let's go, not to skip Jonathan, but let's go to Phil, because I think the traffic flow is the next big hurdle here.
Yeah.
And then we'll get back
So-
to Jonathan.
Again, we have a January 14th letter that outlines 6 points. I'll just kind of cover them in the order to lead with what Natalie introduced there. So in that rear area where the loading occurs, our recommendation would be to remove some additional parking spaces, probably 7 to 10 spaces, because even, without the proposed loading dock area, that is tight in there. And with the deliveries for this type of use, sometimes you'll get them occurring, multiple deliveries all at once. So I think there's adequate parking on the site based on Kimley Horn's evaluation and, historical information here. So I think it would be good to look at removing, those 7 to 10 parking spaces, and it would give us a lot more width, so that if there was a truck parked there, there'd be the ability to bypass, keep the two-way flow, better for emergency access. So I think our recommendation would be to remove, those parking spaces in that whole area.
And just Phil, what you're looking at here, this is us just in about an hour we read your letter and said, hey, you know what, that really looks like it would work. So here's down below. And that's exactly what I believe you're referring to there.
Yeah.
And how does this coordinate with the Woodbury shops traffic flow? And the concern for the Aldi dock going the other way?
Yeah, so I think in terms of deliveries, this keeps the two-way flow back there as it is today. The bigger concern here, I think what we talked about on the shops and even with Aldi, doesn't get affected by this. This is like a pinch point in here. That with those parking spaces in place, you have very limited width for any type of movement. So if we can remove those parking spaces, and this is, I guess, a first shot at what it would look like, maybe even a few more spaces, it would allow that area to remain free. If there are multiple trucks in there, making deliveries, it would give us more maneuvering area. So our recommendation is to look at removing those spaces. It would increase the waiver that exists, but I think it's well within, reason to improve the delivery area there and the flow by removing those spaces.
Yeah, and not statistical analysis, but anecdotal. I very rarely see any cars parked back there.
I was just
Correct.
gonna say the same thing. Are there really people parking back there?
Well, according to the aerial view, there's one lone
There's
ranger.
one, he's not parking legally, so it doesn't matter what you say.
Yeah, no, I've been back there a couple of times. The only things I ever see back there are either service trucks or
Yeah.
deliveries or,
I
I
mean,
mean, think about it.
it's not really parking spaces back there.
Who's gonna park back there and walk all the way around to the front of the building, especially with the
Right.
cart full of groceries? I mean, no one's gonna really
No,
do that.
and honestly, it's not like that parking lot is totally full at any point in time.
Right.
So what I would like, I mean, I would like to see them actually probably move that buffer a little bit further out.
Yeah,
towards, like,
exactly,
where the
yeah.
lights are. And
Yeah.
then where the Sprinter
Or maybe,
vans,
maybe give some designated spaces to their deliveries trucks.
well, I would say that's, I
That's
think the Sprinter
what we
van
were
should be
hoping.
back there as well.
Yep,
Exactly.
They don't belong, I don't want them, see them up against
no, not in
the,
front, yeah.
yeah, up against the
Sort of
building.
like where they
not-
are right now, maybe to the left a little, but
Yeah,
And it's what's interesting about that too, though, is the whole point of these Sprinter vans is it keeps people from being there. So we're actually removing more, activity on the site by having these deliveries. Just the way things are going.
oh, you drew those, for a minute, I'm like, how did you manage to get an aerial view with all those trucks in the rear already?
you know what we were thinking.
We take the comments seriously. And there's my car.
I think that, do you think that that'd be good? All right, Phil, right? And have them use back there for the storage of their
Yeah.
van.
Absolutely. And that leads into kind of one of the other comments that they responded to, that with the online orders, they would all be for deliveries only. It's not like you can do an online order and come and try to pick it up. So I think that all ties together, that this is the area where the vans would be. And, the loss of those spaces, and maybe as they were saying, even if we shifted some of those other sprinters on the left side of the diagram, maybe even lose a few more spaces. I don't think it's,
Yeah, I like,
keep
I'd
that
like,
whole area open.
I'd like to
if
see
you
as
do
much
an
room as
online-
possible.
So
If you-
Phil, Mr. Chairman, this is Mr. Canning.
Yep, go ahead, John.
Yeah, I put the sprinters where they're shown for two reasons. One, they're kind of behind the building, so they're not seen. And two, if you put them too much more to the left, now you're encroaching in the two-way circulation roadway because they're 24 feet, not 18 feet. So we could certainly lose 3 or 4 or 5 more spaces to the right of the sprinter vans, but I wouldn't push them over too far.
Okay, do we know
Yeah.
how many, is it?
Yeah,
8
but
sprinters?
you could, hey, John, I don't know, you take a look at that planter island there, just, if you reconfigured that, you may be able to still do it. But yeah, I think where you have them is far to the east or southeast that we want to go. If it can move them a little bit further to the west or north, then that's fine. But I think
Do
you
we
have
know
to
how,
just look at
approximately
that.
how many vans they're looking to keep there?
Yeah, we're looking for a total of 7 vans total.
Okay, so add 3 more there.
We were keeping 4 here. We're showing 8. This is just again,
Okay.
cut and paste.
Can I interject with I'm not a huge fan, being 20 years in the fire service, of having vehicles parked against the building overnight. I've seen too many car fires or truck fires that have extended from into the building. So I'd like to see us get those for at least for overnight away from the building, and just stranger things happen.
And
Makes
for,
sense. We have no issue with that. We have plenty of spots. So
Yep.
All
okay,
right, sorry, Phil.
Yeah, so I think, we can work together to tweak this area, but I think it will clean that up, make it a much more drivable area. And if you get, a bunch of deliveries at one time, there'll be enough room for everybody to maneuver back there.
Yeah.
The next comment really tied back into our comment about signing, about the delivery. So I think we can work that out also. As I indicated before, Mr. Canning's report, did a thorough overall parking and traffic summary of trip generation. And we're comfortable with that, showing that there was, with whatever changes there would be, they could be accommodated at the intersections based on his analysis. The other area that we wanted to focus on is in the front of the store. So you have, I think, just one crosswalk coming from the main parking area over to the storefront. As you come down to the southwest, I guess that is there, we think there should be some additional signing and maybe another crosswalk. You're going to have a lot more activity with carts going to and from, the parked vehicles. And as you come up past Coles and where that turn is there, I think we want to, as you come around that curve coming from the south, somewhere north of that point is where north of that area is where you'd probably want to have another designated crosswalk and some signing. Just there's going to be a lot more activity in terms of back and forth with carts.
Yeah.
Do you want to have it on a curve like that, though?
No. I'm saying past the curve. So as you come up past the curve, right about where that shadow is of the point.
I got you.
Somewhere up in that area. You don't want it on the curve. You want it just north of the curve. Yeah, with the signing, and that you'll be able to see it as you're driving up around the curve.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
So I think that's important, and that leads into I think they've committed to collecting the carts from the parking area, so that would just be a condition of approval, because similar to what Aldi does there. And those were our primary items. I mean, it was cleaning up that rear delivery area, making sure that we don't get any delivery vehicles up here in front where we have all the pedestrian and vehicle movements near the store entry points. And I think those were the main issues.
So what was the condition that you suggested then? I was reading something else.
Oh, about the responsibility to collect, because they're not going to have cart corrals. So so we don't end up with a situation with the shopping carts left out and blocking spaces or left, rolling around in the parking lot, that they would have a commitment to round up those carts on a periodic basis. I think there was
would that be a nightly basis, or?
I think it's more of the cart would be the lot would be remain in a clear, passable, good condition. And if they receive complaints from the building department receives complaints, then
Do we do that in Aldi's?
Well,
I believe so.
Aldi's has that quarter thing.
Yeah,
you have to return your cart to get your quarter back.
correct.
I thought we did it on one of these.
We had spoken about it at a previous meeting with this site, because this is going to be a little bit new, because they're not going to have cart corrals. They're going to have a porter to get the carts, and all these, they have the cart corral in the front of the building, but you have to put that quarter to get your cart out or back. So, and I've gone to all these a few times, to be honest with you, people seem to really want their quarters back, because there's rarely a cart in the lot.
Right.
So I
think
think
people are going to end up putting their carts in that little striped area in between the lots.
Well, that's why I think we're going to add a condition to the resolution that if there are complaints, that the building inspector could then require them to install cart collection devices.
And we did add, we've got the same corral that they have along the building. We mimic that exactly. So we do have a designated location for the carts, but again,
Where would that be?
that's actually shown on the renderings and also plan. Let me grab that. Here's the rendering.
I have faith in your ability to collect the
Right
carts,
here.
but I'll be honest with you, if you ever go to
Oh.
Giuseppe's in Ramsey, they have the same concept. They have a couple of guys, but I mean, it's you go down there during the holidays and you're
I
dodging.
can't keep up with it.
Yeah, so
maybe we need to make ours 50-cent ones, but yeah, this is the corral here.
Yep.
So it's basically exactly the same as always. We're mimicking that. The one thing just on the discussion of the crosswalks, we agree entirely. The one thing we'd like to add is some additional signage perhaps here that is for short-term parking for people that run in and grab something
Yep.
quickly. It seems to make sense with that. So it's just
Good luck
something
with that.
additional. Yeah, well, we're hopeful.
Is there any intent to have online order with the customer pickup? Because I
They
know
can pick it up.
Staples has some like that.
Yeah, with COVID, that's become a definite thing. This is basically a boutique supermarket. It's not, or not boutique, but it's not a chain supermarket. So we don't have anything established. However, I think that actually would work well with those spaces there for short-term parking.
Yep.
But nothing curbside at all.
No.
That's, yeah,
And
nothing
I know that
curbside.
I think Home Depot has designated spaces for maternity for pregnant and people with young children.
That's a great idea too.
yeah, I don't see an issue with that you guys doing that. I mean, I think you're gonna have more of an enforcement issue than anything with that, but I don't see that being. So what would you do? You just put those put a sign pillar up that short-term
Yeah.
parking only?
Exactly.
You're not gonna like
15-minute
paint the
parking.
spots pink or anything, right?
No,
Yeah.
maybe 15-minute parking, something along those lines.
Now that's not enforceable by the town police, correct?
No, it's
No.
not.
Yeah.
No. It's like I said, it's
The suggestion.
it's a suggestion, so it's on them.
I think the only enforceable ones are the handicap parking, but those aren't enforced that much either.
And fire lane.
And the fire lane, yep.
Yeah.
So
Correct.
I don't think anybody from this board has an issue with you putting 15-minute
No.
parking there.
Great, thank you.
Just a question about the carts again. Is there any way, rather than waiting for complaints from the building department, that we can say something along the lines like it should be maintained throughout business hours during the day, or throughout business hours rather?
Yeah, that can be
Well,
worked in.
the trouble with that though, Evan, is that they may not do that. Right? And so the real issue that we've sometimes had on various special permit applications is to have this requirement that, all right, we're going to try this, but if it doesn't work, they're going to have to come back to the planning board and something else will have to be done in order to address that problem.
So
I know sorry.
I was just going to
Chris.
give like with Evan, with the general overview with special permits is they're all renewable every year. And if the building department does have complaints on any special permit, not just this isn't specific to this site, they would, at the time of the special permit renewal, they would inform the chairperson of the board that, listen, we've gotten a number of complaints based on blah, 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 and they're going to have to come back to us, to the planning board, and have that re-reviewed. So there is a little bit of a mechanism built into there if, special permits do go somewhat awry. But and not really but I hope maybe that clears up somewhat of how some of it works. And if I misspoke, Rick, please keep me honest.
No, it's what we do. It's really both of them together. It's renewed annually and it's automatically renewed unless there are complaints. But we have also had language in there that if in between that year, there are significant complaints that come in, that the planning board can require the applicant to come in to address that situation. So it doesn't have to wait a whole year.
Got it.
I was just curious, Jason, has your team discussed requiring the coin return operation that appears to be functioning really well for Aldi's? I mean, are you guys opposed to including that as well as part of your operations?
We haven't discussed it. It's something we can talk about. We have not discussed it. I don't even know how those technically work, where they get those. I've only seen those at Aldi's, but we can discuss it. I will say one thing, thinking about it, like Home Depot in those areas, when you do have cart corrals out here, it almost looks messier, right? Because it's all
Yep.
established
Yeah, it
out
does.
there. Right, and even when it's a shop, right, when the guy's pushing 30 of them trying to get it back across, you create this traffic hazard. So I think it's going to be easier and more manageable to have a porter, for those that don't bring it back to this location, do that, as opposed to waiting until they stack up and start to stick out into the lanes to do that. So I do
Well,
believe it's,
is all these car corral up against the building like you showed where you would put one? And
Yeah.
not in the
It's
parking
identical.
lot, correct?
Yeah.
So when you're
Right.
talking about ShopRite and Home Depot, those are out, or Walmart, those are out in the middle of the parking lots.
exactly.
Different story.
Exactly.
Different
That's
story.
right.
And
And that's
looking
what
at
we're
other
talking about, not
stores
doing
in the
that.
area, Michael's and Staples, they both use carts, and you see some of them in the parking lot once in a while, but it's not really a big problem.
Yeah, because
Different
think what
cost and all,
happened-
I think.
I think what happens though is, especially what's going to happen, especially in the supermarket, is if the carts aren't in the corral up front, the customers are just going to come in and complain and be like, it's almost going to be almost self-policing, right? Because they can't sell groceries to their customers if they don't have carts. And if they're not cleaning the carts up, then,
No car
they're not going to
available.
sell groceries. So kind of, I think we should, let's give them the benefit of the doubt at this point. We're going to work mechanisms into the site plan, into the resolution, that if this solution they're proposing doesn't work, then we'll have to sit down and speak with them again and have them fix it.
I'm good
When I
with that.
retire, I'll be more than happy to come work for you guys. I want a stress-free job.
He'll be the car police.
Yep. No problem. Put a little reflective vest on. I have no problem with that. Okay, sorry. We've talked about carts a bit. Anything else, Phil?
Yeah, that covers my items. Yeah.
Does the board have any other questions for Phil, as far as, other than shopping carts, traffic flow, parking, rear of the access, where the Sprinter vans are going to be? Jason, I do have one question. They're not planning on deadheading tractor trailers here, right?
No,
Okay.
no, we do not want anything out, tractor trailers sitting out here. It's,
But even in the rear, you're not going to leave a 52-foot
No.
trailer there for.
no, the only thing that, I caught even the comment about that. The only thing that we were discussing is what happens. A lot of these guys come at night, right? So they'll come at 3 in the morning, and they don't get unloaded until their 6 o'clock shift. So they would most likely, I would think, come around and back up to the dock and wait that time. But I don't know how, that's really up on those deliveries.
I think the only thing we would probably want to put around that is an idling, that they can't idle overnight, because there is a hotel
Hotel.
downstream of you.
Yeah.
So that wouldn't be
Yeah.
fair to them to listen to them running all night.
Well, there's also a similar restriction on trucks idling on the thruway.
Yeah, that they can't. I
So
think
they're
they can't even
quality.
idle for more than like 5 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever it is now, right?
Yeah, because of air quality.
Yeah. So I think we'll have to work some sort of restriction, just because you have that hotel down below you. All
Yeah.
these has already been yelled at for keeping trailers there.
Okay, I was just
overnight.
checking as I looked there.
They have a very similar, they have a similar condition in their resolution as well.
That makes sense.
Okay. Anything else on traffic from the team or from the board? Jonathan? Sorry.
Sure. Our report, compared to the excitement that we've been having on other reports, mine's pretty dull. It's dated January the 12th, and comments 1 through 9 of our previous memorandum have all been resolved, as well as comments 11 and 12. Our comment on the sign with the new ruling of the building inspector, the wall sign, appears to be in compliance now. The pylon sign also, the replacement panels seem to be in compliance. We had no problem with our architectural review. And really that's those are all our comments. We didn't have any comments on the loading areas or traffic, understanding that those would be covered by Mr. Greeley and Natalie.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Any questions for Jonathan? All right, I think, John, I think, Jason, you said you had the renderings were almost done?
Yeah, well, yeah, this is actually a rendering. So we've
No, with the
recreated this.
rooftop, for the rooftop equipment.
Yes. So what we're going to do then is we're going to just show the rooftop. We're going to step back in these renderings because this is already 3D modeled. We'll take it from those points that we discussed and then be able to have that.
With the generator or whatever else is going to be on that
Exactly.
roof.
Yeah, we'll put everything up there. We're going to show, we've got a supermarket consultant that we're working with. He hasn't designed all the equipment that goes in the center, but we're going to ask him to provide us for a typical store like this, what that size would be. We'll place that in the center as it's shown, and we'll show that in plan and also in the rendering, so you can see how it's screened.
Okay, so I think we're up to a public hearing stage at this point. How does the board feel about that?
I agree.
Evan?
Yeah, I'm
Michael?
good.
Okay.
I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm okay with it.
So I think what we should do is schedule a public hearing for the 16th. That gives does that give your team enough time to get those renderings done and in so the app they can be reviewed?
Yes, the 16th of February?
Yes.
Yes, we can do that.
Okay. So I'll offer a motion to schedule a public hearing on February 16th.
Second.
Second by Evan. Any questions? All in favor?
I,
Aye. Okay. All right. Anything else for this applicant from our team? All right, then I guess we will see you guys on the 16th.
Great, thank you very much. We appreciate everybody's efforts, and thanks for spending the last hour with us. We'll see you.
short
Take care.
meeting, right?
That's it.
One last thing.
Yeah.
Last item on the agenda, CVPM, review and discuss proposed amendment to the previously approved site plan and special permit to include personal service. Said property is located at 252 through 260 Route 32 in Central Valley and is known in the Village of Woodbury tax maps, section 230, block 7, lot 17, 18, and 19. Good evening, Mr. Esposito.
Good evening, how are you?
Good, how are you this evening?
I'm good, and the good news is we're not proposing any shopping carts.
Ah, darn.
Yeah, so, our application, we're requesting an amendment to the originally approved site plan to amend the use table to include personal services. So it would be personal services, retail, and office. And we're not proposing any physical changes to the site plan. We're not proposing any physical changes to the buildings, interior or exterior, and just looking to broaden our ability to market the building because there is some interest from companies that would be considered personal services.
All right, thank you, sir. Natalie?
All right, so just to kind of reiterate what was discussed at the last meeting, it seems like, the primary impacts of adding personal services to the site and accepted uses that are already permitted appear to be related to parking, as well as generated water and sewer demand. So the applicant, I'll defer to Phil's office on the parking issue entirely. And with respect to the water and sewer, just to keep it really brief, the projected water and sewer demand form was submitted. It requires clarification. It's unclear what areas are being reserved for the personal service. The sum of the areas on the form are more than the building footprint, so that was unclear to us. Also, the designation of restaurant area appears to be changing just based on that form, so maybe it's a typographical error, we're just not sure. And really just to kind of bring it home for the planning board and the village's considerations with respect to water and sewer right now is, although it appears to be just a modest increase in demand, we're looking for accurate numbers so that we can, advise the village properly for planning purposes. So, that's really the limits of my comments on this, I think, at this time. And, we'll look forward to that revised form and the basis of those calculations that are submitted.
If I could, can I just talk a little bit about sewer and water? Because, we've always said that this building is it's speculative in nature. We're requesting the addition in the use table of personal services. The original, and when we were here before the board originally, we pulled out our crystal ball and we did our best to what we thought to estimate what the sewer and water demands would be for the building. The original allocations for sewer and water daily was 3,956 gallons a day. That's 1.4 million gallons a year. We now have a reality. We have 8 apartments totaling 12 bedrooms that have been occupied for 353 days, 12 days short of a full year. We also have 1,400 square feet of retail that has been there for 4 months. So if we take the design criteria that we did the original 3,956 gallons and apply it to what's been there to date for the 353 days, we know that number would be 482,000 gallons a day, gallons for the 352 daes. The reality of it is because I just got a letter from the Sewer and Water Department today, that we're using 247,000 gallons for that time period, just short of a year, which is 50% less than what it would be if we just assigned the design criteria. And it's only 20% of what the overall, allocation was from the original approval. The building is the commercial part of the building, which is the office and retail, is 20% of that's already leased. We're talking about 5,700 square feet total of additional leasable space. With regard to the form, Natalie, there was definitely a typo on the square footage for the restaurants. We're not changing that number, and that's clear on the site. We don't know who our tenants are going to be, but we know that in terms of zoning, personal services are viewed the same as office and as retail. If you look at the ITE, trip generations, there is really no distinguish between the 3 of those uses. And we just feel comfortable that our original allocation is adequate to meet the leasing out of the rest of this building. But again, if I can't tell you how many square feet I'm going to have for user A or user B until we get into a contract, and they're going to be a permitted use in either category.
So I'll just kind of touch on that a little bit, Steve, just to respond to your response. I know Phil is gonna recommend actual real life parking, a real count of parking that's on site currently, and it's not unheard of for the planning board to consider actual generation for uses as they exist. I mean, it's the real life, real time numbers. So you can certainly present that in your water and sewer, analysis. What's being used now and what's proposed as part of the personal service, and just again discussing demands based on what it would be for retail versus a barber shop or a salon. Like, it's clearly evident that that would require more water and generate more sewer than just a store that is occupied mostly just by an employee. So again, we're looking for that information for planning purposes, and I think you have the information available, it sounds like. So, please provide it with your next submission.
But we don't want to lock ourselves into a 1,200 square foot barber shop if we don't know what our barber shop, if it's even going to be a barber shop, how many square feet they're going to need.
Well, you're suggesting flexibility to have, 7,161 square feet be designated to personal service. That's
Correct.
what you're, yeah. So present that as a worst case scenario for the area or for the building. That's what we're looking for, I think, is the worst case situation so that we can evaluate it from a planning perspective.
Well, I think that, if you look at, all right, well, we're pretty comfortable where we are. If you look at the real numbers of what's been going on for almost a year.
Well, the real numbers are reflective of the occupants for the residencies upstairs.
residents and retail.
and the one retail. So, I mean, if you're committed to maintaining that portion of retail that's there now and maintaining that square footage, then your analysis can consider the real-time usage for both of those, the residential areas upstairs and the one office, plus the excess of personal service and restaurant use that you would be anticipating in a worst-case scenario. Does that make sense? No.
No, but we'll work on it.
Your actual usage for the residential uses and the office, present that in your analysis, and then add the excess that would be reserved for the restaurant use, 1,479 square feet, plus personal service as the remainder. I mean, that's what I think you're suggesting would be the worst case, and that's what we're looking to see.
Okay.
Does the team have any other questions for Natalie or questions for Natalie? No? Okay. Phil?
Okay, so we had prepared a brief letter January 13th. So they provided an update of the previous shared parking analysis, which seems to be in order. They're using the standard generation figures, et cetera. Our real key issue is, since we have some occupancy there on the site, especially with the residential, we're recommending that, some actual, what is the current utilization? What's available? And then also an explanation of, it was this blanket 20 car number used in the shared parking analysis. I just didn't really understand the background behind that. So if they could clarify that, give some real actual data of usage, parking usage for what's occupied, as Natalie was mentioning, with the residential and whatever commercials occupied, so we know what's going on. I think overall the shared parking analysis, is reasonable. There was no credit taken for, any of the residents, really using the commercial space. So at the end of the day, it may pan out, but I think now that we have some occupancies, it would be important to know actual parking utilization as opposed to all projections.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, Phil, because just being in the area, I can tell you that the parking lot during the day is much different than the parking lot is at night or on the weekends with the cars that are there. So while books are good, real world analysis, I think, is much better here. The only thing I'm concerned of with the personal services, with traffic and trips, and is I look at like a dry cleaner or something like that, because that's considered a personal service at this point. Traffic for those types of places, if I look at the one that's across the street by the bagel store, like in the morning, it's heavy. Like everybody's like on their way to work, in, out, a lot of trips going in and out. Middle of the day, it dies. And then in the afternoon, again, you got that same thing, that 5 to 7, people are in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. Right. And at the same time that's going on, that intersection, Estrada and 32, you've got the buses, you've got traffic, you got people trying to get into that lot. You're going to potentially put one of those services in there that is going to be conflicting, I think, with the traffic at that intersection, because that intersection is horrible in the morning. Anybody that lives here will tell you that that intersection is horrific in the morning and in the afternoon. So depending on what personal service goes in there, I think there could be even worse traffic, because you got all these people trying to make these quick trips in or out. Right. And then if they're coming out the one way on the 32 by the bank, the people are going to try to make that left across 32. It happens already. And that intersection of 32 and Smith Clove Road in the morning, when kids are getting dropped off for school and the buses are trying to get up the hill, that intersection, cars are already blocking that intersection in the morning. Like you always get people either trying to run that light off of Smith Clove Road and get onto 32, or the lights between Estrada and Smith Clove Road aren't timed right. So you'll get the green at Estrada, Smith Clove and 32, but you'll have the red.
You get stuck.
You get stuck. and that whole strip backs up, and that's just real world. I think the other four board members that live here
Yep.
can see that and just
And
do the
you
test.
even coming out of that gas station over there too.
Yeah. So I think going with something like a personal service, because it does include dry cleaners, it does include those types of. I'm having a real hard time wrapping my head around allowing it in that strip mall, with the constraints of how the traffic has to go in and out, and the people coming up Estrada, the hotel that's being built on Estrada. I don't know. I don't know if there's anything we can do to account for it, but I think it's going to be a problem there.
Yeah, I
Just
have a
real
question
world.
about the parking. Does the parking analysis include potential occupancy of the old bank building? The one that used to be to the bank?
Yes.
Yes, that whole parking lot is one big pool. Because there was an approval given for a children's place for the bank. And they were allocated certain spots that they had to get deducted off. And the bank parking was actually built out in this parking lot already too. So I don't know.
That's where that number 20 came from.
Yeah. Right, the 20 spots for the children's place, the bounce house place, whatever that was. Uh-oh, we lost Phil. We scared him away.
He's pushing carts.
So I think there are some legitimate concerns about expanding the use of that strip mall. Sorry, taxpayer. But I don't know what Rick or or Natalie, if anybody has some suggestions on what we do, because I think there's some real world issues around expanding the services there.
I think the questions you're raising are the right ones that need to be addressed by this board in order to expand the uses to include the personal service use. And so it needs, I think you've set forth a platform to allow that to be addressed, and then you see where all these numbers lead and then make your decision.
Okay. Well, while we wait for Phil, Jonathan?
Sure. I guess in terms of the evidence submitted, I was curious at what Phil thinks of these two graphs that were submitted about the peak monthly daily parking demand by hour on weekday and weekends. So I think that really, we can all sort of imagine what different patterns if there's a barber shop or a dry cleaner. But if you focus just on that evidence submitted, I don't think there's a very big problem here. And really the only issue is parking. And I think Mr. Greeley we should follow his recommendations. But in terms from a planning perspective, substituting personal uses to some extent in a strip mall, I don't see as being terribly concerning. I think the mix of uses works, and in our memorandum, we didn't find any particular problems. All the information I think has been provided that we were looking for. But I'll defer to our traffic consultant on the issue of parking and hours of peak demand and whether there's a significant shifting that needs to be addressed.
I think normally I don't disagree or challenge, but I would be more than happy to buy you a cup of coffee one day and have you come sit out on Smith Clove Road and 32 with me and take a look at what happens and what those two intersections look like, and the use across the street with the bank and the bagel shop and the dry cleaner and the nail place, and they have no residential above them. That's just strictly a strip mall. Again, this is where I say I understand the book says one thing and what estimates are and what trip generations and what ITE and that says. I think this is real world is
reality is different.
In reality, it's much different from 4 or 5 people that live it every day.
I'm kind of mixed.
I'll get off my soapbox now.
I agree with what you're saying about that portion of 32 and those times. It's awful, but you know, I also kind of feel that any sort of, you know, if you have restaurant as an approved permitted use, and if it's food service or other things like that, and you have retail already there, you already have the same problems that personal service adds to, but already has. They are, you know, they're all problematic regardless. So I'm not, you know, I'm not sure how you solve that.
Chris, while we're waiting for Phil, you have two issues still that you have to consider, which is whether to set a public hearing. And also, I think that this ought to be referred to the county planning department again, because it's a significant potential change and they should be able to weigh in on it.
They have enough information for the 239, I think, right?
I
Yeah,
think
so
so, yes.
I'll make the motion that we refer it to to submit the 239 for the referral to the county.
I'll second.
Second, Tommy, any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
And I think we'd like to get, I think the public input will be important here. There may be absolutely none. I think we can schedule a public hearing for the 12th. Wait, hold on, sorry. 16th, sorry. I was in the wrong year. So I'll make a motion to schedule a public hearing for February 16th.
Second.
Second, Evan, any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
I guess Phil is not going to join us again this evening. Maybe he lost his internet or something.
Let me see if I have his cell.
Yeah.
I don't.
I do. I think it's in his email. Let me just call him quickly.
While she's doing that, what are some other examples of personal services other than barbershop, dry cleaner?
I'll get you the actual, we define that.
Things like nail salon.
Hold on, I'm getting the actual list from services. Definition. Person, wildlife facility. I just read this the other day. Oh, here we go. An establishment primarily engaged in providing services involving the specialized care of a person or a person's apparel, including but not limited to a beauty shop, nail salon, barber shop, tailor shop, or exercise, martial arts, or dance studio. So the dance studio concerns me because like with my daughter's dance studio now, you're not allowed to go inside. So you have 15 parents all sitting in the parking lot waiting for them. And then like as soon as the dance class is over, it's a mass exodus. Same thing with like exercise. You could potentially have 20, 25 people showing up all for a spin class at the same time. So I think it's a little bit different than having like a restaurant or like a deli than having a dance studio or something like that. I think that, to me, I think that the patterns are going to be different.
Phil's office, he thinks that the transformer blew or something, so they have no internet there. And although he's trying to log in on his phone, he is having difficulties just because there's no internet. So
poor engineering.
Chris, to comment on the allowable uses for personal use. I see nothing, there is nothing that I know of that would prevent you from saying you can have personal uses except for dance classes or except for, anything else on the list that you think is going to be sort of an outlier with respect to the limited parking and other traffic issues involved.
Oh,
So-
okay, I see. See, it's not an all or nothing type list, is what you're saying.
It typically is, but you have the ability to fashion what uses are permissible here. And since you're allowed to have all of it, you could say, well, you can have some of it, but not all of it. I know of nothing that would prevent you from doing that.
If you have a perspective.
And I would hate to have, for instance, a personal use category denied generally because of valid concerns about one particular type of personal service use that's an outlier with respect to the issues that you're grappling with now.
Understood. Go ahead, Evan. I do think you were gonna.
If you have one prospective tenant that, let's say like this, like a barber shop, can you approve just that tenant's use, additional use, or does it have to be a broad brush of anyone that comes in?
Well, you could say, the only personal service use permissible is a barber shop, but I think that you don't want to get too granular with respect to that type of decision making, because it just then forces the applicant to come back with, when they get a new tenant, and now they have to come back to you and you have to do all this other stuff. So I generally you would
could say how many square foot there could be allowed for that, correct?
say that again.
You could say how many square footage would be allowed for that, right?
You could, yes. And generally, I wouldn't suggest that you sort of try to limit uses and just generally allow uses, because I think it's more flexible. And I think the zoning is meant to do that. But I also don't want that to sort of backfire into saying, well, now you can't have any because we're concerned about one or two that may never be considered by this applicant.
Definitely not a decision we got to make tonight, though. So I
Yeah.
think we can all think we can think about that.
And at some point, I just encourage everybody to, try to add a little reason into this. We want this project to be successful. We want Mr. Esposito to be able to find tenants. And one of my old professor buddies at Rutgers, Anton Ellison, used to say that congestion is the sign of a successful place. So, we don't want this place to be completely free of traffic and nothing going on and no problems at all, because at some level of congestion is going to happen. And I don't know that the difference between having a barber shop or a retail store is going to really be that critical thing that causes havoc in your hamlet.
Yeah, but when you already have, and I don't want to belabor this because it's getting late, but when you already have poor performing intersections, which we already know we do, whether or not the book says it, anybody that lives here, and this is what this part of this board's responsibility is too, is think about the overall picture for Woodbury. Anybody that lives here will tell you those two intersections are probably the two worst intersections in all of Woodbury during morning and afternoon hours. Yep. And I'm only up here 6 years, and I can tell you that. So anybody that's lived here longer than me will attest to the traffic has only gotten worse and worse and worse. So the more you add, the more you allow, the worse it's going to get. Because I could tell you from trying to make a left into the pizza place on a Friday night, they pick up pizza. You can wait 15 minutes to get a break in traffic to make that left into the pizza place or to get out of the pizza place. So there's already an existing problem here. So this board, I don't think, wants to add to an existing problem. While traffic is good, business is good, everybody wants the business to develop and be successful. It's at what price? If it takes you 10 minutes to go a quarter mile, is that really what's the best thing for everybody in Woodbury? But I think I've said enough. My viewpoint has been made very clear on this. I think the rest of the board we'll weigh in when we get to that point. You know, and take the guidance and from the rest of the consultants and what they see from living here. Oh, Phil, you're back.
Hey, Chris, I'm back. Yeah, that we had some transformer blew up or something. So one of the things, I guess, you know, traffic and parking are really two separate items. So on the parking end of things, I think it's really important to see what actual utilization is, because if there's not enough parking, that's a bigger problem than a few more trips. And I understand exactly what you're saying in terms of the congestion. And I think when this was approved originally, there were going to be some modifications of timing at those signals. Now, I don't know if that ever occurred.
It did occur.
I think it was part of the original approvals, right, Steve?
Yes, yeah.
And in their analysis, and I'd have to go back and look, I don't know whether they used generic trip generation for the retail component. So how much differential the trip numbers would be, that's something we could look at. We go back to the original studies to get a handle on it. And, you know, your point is, you know, right, in terms of some of those uses, you know, they peak during the peak hours, because most of those trips, they're attracting people that are out, you know, whether they're commuting, stopping at the cleaners. But we could look at what was considered in the original traffic projections and see what that differential would be for some of those uses. But I think from the parking standpoint, I think it would be important to see what actual usage is in terms of this shared parking analysis, you know, was reasonable. But I think on the peak time, you were using up every space in the analysis. So if there are already more spaces used out there today, that could be more of an issue. And if there's not parking, is always a bigger issue. As Jonathan says, you know, in some areas you want it vibrant, but if there's no parking, that creates the traffic issue where
Right,
it
'cause
becomes
people
more
are
of a problem.
circling and waiting and
Yeah.
stuff like.
Yeah. So I think we wanted to, from my perspective, you know, the traffic we can look at and see what that differential is. And, you know, granted, what you're describing, we know that happens there, okay? But more critical, I think, is the parking, because if there's not enough parking, that's a bigger problem.
Yeah, no, I completely get it, and I agree with what you're saying, and make very valid points. Are you able to reach out to the DOT and find out, that just double check that those enhancements have been made to the intersections?
I know they agreed to allow it.
No, they were done. They were done
They were?
during construction.
Okay.
Yeah.
What enhancements were done?
We put in a, what do you call that thing, Phil? It's not the computer, but the
Actuation?
yeah, so we put in
Because now they're using cameras. So I don't know. I'd have to look back to see what was
it was
done.
pre-camera request. But we did the strata in 32.
And if they put loop detectors or something, it's not working. Because
Yeah,
you consider.
it may not be
Now
functional.
the problem was, I have to tell you that, just reminding me of something, is that, you know, those are controlled by the DOT, and we made it smarter. But I'm not sure that they synced it the way they should be syncing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because there was.
Well, that's what I was, you know, even if you put in the piece of equipment, it may not be functioning properly.
Right.
So I'll find out.
Whatever was done, it's not syncing right over there.
Yep.
It's horrible.
And you recall this, the DOT came through on 32, probably, you know, a couple of years before we started the project, did some improvements, and then we built on those. But yeah, you can check with
Phil will dive into it, sharpen his
We'll
mouse.
find out.
Click his send button. We'll get it to the bottom of it.
That's it.
All right. So updated water analysis based on real-time usage, and then worst case scenario with the rest of that building being personal services, I think is what Natalie suggested. Real-time parking counts, right, Phil?
Yes.
Okay. And then you'll follow up with the DOT and stuff. And then we have a public hearing scheduled for the 16th, and the 239 has been done.
Okay.
I think we got everything, right, Rick? Okay, cool. All right, anything else, Steve?
No, that's it.
All right, with that said, thank you very much, Steve. I'll offer a motion to
Thank you.
close.
Okay, see you.
Second
Take
and
care.
third.
Tommy, anybody want to
Thank
stay?
you.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
All right, everybody have a good,
Have a good night.
Night,
Good night,
everybody.
everyone.
Nice
Bye
meeting
now.
you, Michael.
Bye now.
Yes, Michael, nice meeting you.